Hello, everyone. Welcome to this fourth episode of Screaming Into the Void. With me today, personally, is my friend Darcy. Darcy, say hello.
Hi.
And also with me today is my best friend Steve and his guests. Steve.
So, I have my dad here. Dad, say hi.
Hi, Dad.
And we also have my friend Flo here. I go to college with Flo, and she's home with me on spring break. Flo?
Hi.
All right.
So,
we have
what's our topic
three
today?
topics today. The primary one we're going to be discussing at the beginning of this podcast is baby boomers primarily versus millennials, or via catch-all, the older generations versus millennials and Gen Z. Primarily millennials, though. So, what we're really going to be discussing today is mostly not so much accusations per se, but why the need for comparisons are made or why they're so common. And I know Flo has something she wanted to start with today.
Yeah, so as Steve said, we're going to college together, and one of the classes I'm actually taking while there is going over the differences between the various generations, starting with veterans, which was about the 1920s to the 1940s. So they became adults during the Great Depression and World War II. They were seen as a stabilizing force and have a wealth of lore and wisdom. Baby boomers, on the other hand, are from 1942 until about 1965. So they are the people that were born following World War II, and they became adults during social protests, and they experimented with the different lifestyles that were available, as well as pervasive questioning of values. And they have a very strong work ethic. They are achievement-oriented and goal-oriented. They try to have a level playing field for everyone. And then following the baby boomers is Gen X. That's from 1966 until 1985. And this is the generation right before millennials, or Gen Y, as we have also been called. And millennials are from approximately 1986 until 1999, 2000. So there is definitely, it's more so the years that we're looking at with this class per se, because of when people are coming to age.
Okay.
So, the main point we're trying to make today is, are there different values and are there different realities that these two generations find different from what Flo just mentioned? So, I'll give it over to my dad.
There are different realities. That's it, the issue.
Okay.
The values are all basically the same, but it's the realities of your values, whatever values you have. Each generation has its own values. You could say, like you said about lifestyles. Well, to me, every generation has lifestyle ideas and what they think their lifestyle should be. But I think everybody has work and goal values, what they might be from one generation to another. Sometimes it's depending on where you come from. And I think also, for myself, just to square this away, is that we're kind of making this topic kind of in the United States, because if you go worldwide, this doesn't really hold up at all.
Right.
And because if you meet people from other parts of the country and they come from a war-torn area, their whole cultural class and how old you are.
I'm assuming it's not a very prevalent thing when there's more issues to be had than just the younger generation versus the older generation. At that point, it's not really a prevalent topic. There are other things to attend to.
Right, which are more important to those people in those time frames.
The benefits of first world ignorance.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think the baby boomers, or anybody, whatever generation that Flo has clarified for us, has their own set of experiences that were run during that time. There were a certain set of, even in the last, if you will, say 2 generations. Do we define generation between
Millennials and baby boomers.
No. Between the 20s, the 2000 to now.
Oh, so that's Gen Z.
Gen Z. Okay. Just so I have a name for them. But just considering that, just in the technology area, take the technology, everything from, it's like we went from tape, cassette tape, to CDs, just moving right up the line here to now we're at the point where we have streaming network. So how does that really infuse values on people in the last 15 or 20 years?
See, the only issue that I have with generalizing anything for this up and coming generation is the fact that most of them are still not old enough to, like, they're still living with their parents. They're young children. The only person that would technically fall under that I know that's not living with their parents, my friends from back home, but that's their own personal.
So are you saying you got to be away from this category?
No, I'm just saying that how my textbook is defining this is you are becoming of age during a certain time period, and the Gen Z are not yet of age. Like there's a few.
So you got to become of age to be in this category and have these values. And
I do not mean to interject here, but I'm going to purely for this.
Sure.
This is a technical thing. You guys are cutting out on the microphone fairly commonly every couple words. You might have to make some readjustments.
All right.
Okay.
I'll talk to our technical advisor here.
I'll do some readjusting.
Yes, but I will take the helm on this for a second to give you guys a moment to readjust. So, at least in my opinion, when it comes to how we define generations or how we do these things, you said that there was a set value of, regardless of what generation you are talking about, and now that's going to be common because we're human beings that all have their own set values. But when I look at the generations, at least the millennials and Gen Z, the current and the previous, just by a few years, it's obviously defined as the generation of technology. But ironically enough, I think not my main problem, but my personal opinion that when it comes to this is you have a generation that did not grow up with this technology, or at least not to the level of which can now reach out to.
Especially like social media, in my opinion.
Of course, and the interaction for example, I'm talking to you guys across the country and Darcy from the comfort of my home, and this is a fairly standard practice. People 20, 30 years ago would have killed for technology like this now. The amount of...
Yeah, it would just mail or like...
Right, and that's what I'm saying is just... So when you have a generation of parents who don't know how to not necessarily restrict, but oversee this type of behavior, it almost comes down to the moral value of the child and what they receive from their parents and how they're going to act. Because a lot of parents that I've talked to don't really... I see their child and I see them. I know what their child posts on their social media, and then I see them with their parents. And the amount of times I want to say, do you know what your kid posts? Do you know what they do? That's just a generalization, but it's fairly common. And that's something that I think is interesting to keep track of, is just a lot of research that I have seen almost pities the millennial generation and Gen Z for growing up on this age of connectivity, because it has now had at least in my opinion, a very bad mental impact on the younger generation.
Yes, social media, some people, they get insecure and then they get depressed because they want to look like someone else. They want to be like a big star. They want to be popular and all this. And in reality, you don't need that. As long as you're a good person and you are happy with what you're doing and you're proud and you're doing something like productive, then you should focus on that. But unfortunately, a lot of kids these days, they just focus on how I look like on the media.
Agreed. And I think that's one of the things that we need to keep in mind is just, it's not necessarily the fact that this generation should be pitied, but it's a matter of fact of it was a really bad time. Not necessarily a bad time, because I'm saying that technology is the source of all evil as I sit here with a triple monitor setup and a bunch of expensive hardware. That's not what I'm trying to say. But it's more or less a matter of when you have this much change over the past 20 years we've seen, there's much change over this last 2 decades, almost in comparison to the last 80 years. The things we can do now is substantially higher. So when you have a generation that shouldn't I'll say it like this, that technology is advancing faster than the people are, realistically. Yeah. And that is why I think we have these issues. And that is why I think the older generation compares themselves so much to the millennials, because now, this is a question for Steve's dad. And now, when you were younger, did the older generation mock you for being younger or growing up in your generation? I have heard that no matter what generation you grow up in, that's a fairly standard practice. That you never get away from that. It's always a comparison for comparison's sake.
What are you comparing? I don't know.
Well, for example, it's just for me. When I talk to older generations, it's like these millennials, man. What are they doing? These kids. Back when you were a child, did you hear things like that from the older generation as well? It didn't have to be on any real comparison basis.
Lifestyles.
It was back in the day. We used to do it this way, or back in the day we did it that way. Or I walked 10 miles to school. It's like,
wow.
Right. Back in my day, I had it harder, so therefore that makes me better mentality. You know what I'm saying?
I do have a comparison, I think, in the military, which was a significant one, at least for a baby boomer / World War II guy. For example, if you went to war in World War II, you got on a ship, you were there, 4 or 6 weeks, you got off, did your fighting for a couple of years, got on the ship, came back, you were on the ship decompressing, if you will, for about 5 or 6 weeks. Vietnam, you would be in Vietnam in 2 days. You could be in a rice paddy on Tuesday, and Saturday you'd be back home, discharged from the military. So your decompression time was a couple days. Now, I think a lot of people of that generation, you wonder why people are so messed up and why they do so many VAs, VA and suicide, why they have, one a day of suicide now from the Vietnam era. Partly is that they really didn't decompress, because the other guys in the older generation had, like I say, that 6 weeks or something with your buddies, and you came back. To me, that was a significant one. The military, I can only speak for myself. The military for me was a fun, good thing in a sense. I didn't go to war, so that was a good thing. I was Vietnam era, but I didn't see a battlefront. The thing about war is you always wonder if you're going, or if you're here and you see the people over there and you wonder if they're going to pull the trigger. That's a problem.
It can be.
And
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, it's. I was thinking of trauma issues because one of the things that I was talking with Flo and Steve earlier was about everybody faces trauma. The question is, what kind, how much, and when it happens in your life. Everybody has trauma. How do you recover for it? How do you do with it? I think the generations dealt with it a little differently. Like, grandma wasn't doing too well. Let's take her in the house and make a room for grandma. Nowadays, grandma's sick. What home can we put her in? Where let's get the social worker on the phone. Let's take the money and hide it in trusts so we don't have to pay for this even. So that's something I think is a money-driven talk about relationships with your family.
Well, could you almost say that? So one of the, from the military perspective and from a world perspective, I also would like to think that world events really do matter during those times.
Oh, they do. For example, no question.
During this time of mine and Steve's life, besides the Iraq, Afghanistan, Middle Eastern war, which I currently on paper fight in at this very moment. Realistically, what world events are we really worried about? For example, growing up years ago, you had to worry every day if Russia was going to launch a nuke and end all of us. You had to worry what was next. In this current generation, it's still, relatively speaking, an era of peace on paper, which is why people would say the military has gotten softer as time has gone on, peacetime breeds softer people, at least is what I hear, and I could almost actually agree to an extent, yes. So I think when you make these comparisons too, you need to think about the world and how it's shaped at the time. When you are on a constant state of flux and from a genuine perspective, right? If you're in the military during those times, you're always ramped up, stressed, on high because you have to be. Because at any moment, like you said, you didn't know where you were going to be next. For me, relatively speaking, I can do 20 years and I know I'll never see a battlefield unless something drastically changes in the next 17 years. So
Well,
if at the
Can
current...
I give you an example?
Yes.
I'll give you an example. 9/11. I think that affected a whole lot of people.
Oh, yes. I was
Yes,
6 years old
and-
at the time.
Right. But even at 6 years old, you remember it. You know what was going on.
I remember
And
where I
think
was.
it had right. It's exactly. It's like when President Kennedy got shot. You remember where you were.
Yeah.
When Walter Cronkite came on and said, "Hey, Kennedy's dead. He got shot at 1:00." So I think that was definitely one event for baby boomers, or not baby boomer, the millennials. 2008 depression, when you lost 50% of your portfolio, and everybody's like, it's 1929 all over again.
I have a
But
question
realistically, it all came back,
Mhm.
because if you really study the market, it does come back, and it
Right.
did come back.
It
And
always
it's even
usually
higher
does.
than it was.
Mhm. Right.
Okay, you have a question for Flo?
I do.
Yes.
So, Flo, would you say, and now I ask this because I think this, would you say a major event defines a generation? So, for example, from a military perspective, 9/11 defines the military generation for the millennials. It defined that generation of how we fought in that war and defined the next generation era of modern warfare, right? That's from how we fight wars now. It's very different. It's a lot of the same. It's also a lot of different. So would you almost say that events as high caliber as those can define a generation?
I think to an extent, yes. I think a large part of my generation, at least where I grew up, as I mentioned earlier, I was born in Colorado. Fun fact, I lived a block and a half away from that happened.
I'm sorry, from what? You cut out.
I'm from Colorado. I lived a block and a half away in high school when that happened. So I feel that, yes, there are certain events that do define how things are, how you react to certain things. But I also think it's circumstantial. Like, there's children from New York City that definitely remember, and I did. I was out in,
Flo was cutting out tremendously, Steve. You guys might have to reposition again. At least Flo might have to. Dad was okay. But I got the gist of what you were saying, and I do agree that everything is purely based circumstantially. It depends on the caliber. Again, I hate using the words, but the caliber of the event. So when 9/11 affected everybody, the entire country, Columbine, it did affect the entire country, but primarily it affected that general area. It depends.
Yes.
We didn't go to war because of Columbine. We went to war because of 9/11. So I think that's one thing that needs to be considered. And I think one thing that we should take a look at least in my opinion, is why the need for these comparisons should be met. So again, when we brought this topic up and we were discussing this, I know I don't want to say Steve's dad. How should I refer to you as?
Dad is fine.
Dad? Okay, that works for me. So, Dad, when
Dad,
we have these things, I know you said that you feel that there is a need for comparisons to be made, or is there any at all? But I'm not speaking from my perspective, because the reason I bring it up is because clearly to some people there is a difference. Now, obviously on paper there is a difference, primarily the first one being when they were born. There's obviously a difference there. But when it comes to why the need for comparisons are made, why do you feel that is? Is it because of the luxuries, quote unquote, of the millennial generation growing up in an era of peace and technology? Do you feel it's just the fact that parents are apparently on paper easier on their kids? Why do you think that there is a need for comparisons to be made?
Well, I think people really compare the problems, and they're trying to solve them. So they bring out everything they can historically to try and solve the problem. So you're going to do a lot of comparison. for example, let's use Columbine. What worked in the past? What didn't work? What should we do differently? Should we put cops with guns in places? Should the teachers be armed? Should we train the teachers? And then everybody puts their 2 cents in. And as they put their 2 cents in, we're comparing this idea or comparing that idea. Should we have gates that search for metal detectors at the gates in every school? Go ahead.
Yeah,
Sure.
you know, some school, like in bigger city, they actually have that.
Yeah. So my elementary school in Wyoming, we had cops at the doors, armed. We had metal detectors, and we had to have clear plastic backpacks so they could see what we were bringing to school with us. I was 5.
Wow.
So just be aware that, like,
Careful if you guys are
some
moving the mic.
places
There's a lot
actually
of feedback
mattered.
coming from your microphone. Steve,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of
I know.
feedback coming from the mic, just so you guys are
Hang
tracking.
on. Is that any better?
Yes, just don't move or touch it.
Right.
No touchy.
Yes. But I can't actually imagine reacting to that. So I don't believe from when that happened. What year did Columbine happen again? Please let me know. Please refresh me on that.
1999.
99. So I was 4 years old when that happened. Now, considering the fact that it happened in a different state, I don't remember my school reacting to that extent. I don't remember us having to do anything along those lines. I would imagine I was 4 years old at the time, because I believe I was in preschool. I'd imagine that school security heightened up for a little bit, but as time went on, obviously it died back down once the need, the need for it went back down. But I think today, recently, or the past, I remember I was scrolling through my social media per the usual, and there was a fake shooting at a college. People were tweeting saying, "Oh my God, there's a shooting at my school. What's going on?" And then the school had to release a press release saying, "There's no shooting happening. There was no shooter. We don't know where this came from."
That actually happened at Syracuse, I believe. I believe it was last semester. And I mean, I remember in high school, right after the Parkland shooting, there was a child from my high school who came to school with a gun and was going to shoot up my high school. And they had to, call the cops. He was arrested. He was put on house arrest for the next, year and a half or something. And I remember the school was trying to downplay it as if it hadn't happened. So I think it depends on where and what the circumstance was. Like Syracuse, it obviously wasn't real, whereas at my school, it almost was.
So this is a good one for Dad. So Dad, when you when you brought up earlier that if there is a comparison to be made, in your opinion, if there was one thing you do or do not like about the younger generation, or if there was one thing that either aggravates you or you like, what would those things be? If you feel there are comparisons to be made.
Well, first of all, it's the prejudice that's shown by people in comparing people, period, and not treating people as individuals.
Agreed.
The definite prejudice, I'll give you a definition to work with: an emotional commitment to ignorance. Okay? So somebody who really has no research or anything just makes a statement about you. Like, those millennials are all lazy. Well, I don't think all millennials are lazy. I think some are more energetic, maybe, but that's about any generation. It's not just whether you're young or old. I can tell you that my enthusiasm for work has grown less as I get older. Now, does that make me somebody that's, because I'm a baby boomer, I'm lazy, or I'm getting there and thing? The other interesting, as we're sitting here talking, can I just kind of move off the topic a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to make a statement. I was thinking about World War II, and they came home, and I was just thinking about the sexual revolution, if you will, because when I went to college in the 70s, if we had the pill, it was like free love. And the word orgy was a happening thing, if you will. Not to mention all the marijuana, the summer of love in '65, and all those kind of baby boomers and stuff. Then what happened? All of a sudden, as we move on and graduate, and get to work, AIDS came along. And because of the AIDS, I think it scared the hell out of a lot of people. And the issue was then became, if you mess around now, you might die from it. Literally die. The thing we were worrying about was you get pregnant or STDs. And that was about the extent of it. So if I made two comparisons, to me that's a big comparison there. The other one was the view on LBGT and gays marrying, and first of all, anybody marrying in that sense, you know, same-sex marriages. Boy, back in the baby boomers' day, that was unheard of, or if it was happening, it was definitely on the secret down low. Now it's open, it's legal, which I think is a much better thing that everybody should get married if they want. Everybody has a right to be as miserable as the married people, the regular people.
Totally agree.
Shouldn't be limited to just married men and women. Everybody should have a chance at it. So those are just two things about that, just while I was on the top of my head, because I couldn't get my printer to work. My son was too busy setting up this podcast to help me with the printer. What were we were talking about Columbine. Oh,
yep.
I can only speak here. When Columbine happened here, Lancaster got a resource officer with a loaded gun on duty all the time. Got his own police car, so he was monitoring the school grounds, and for every event, he's there.
But there was only one.
Right.
Yeah.
See, we had
Yeah. But you
we
also
had 6.
You were the town away from Columbine.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I literally was.
Mm-hmm.
And the high school was even more heightened
Of course.
in security than the elementary
yeah.
school, because a 6-year-old is going to come with an AR-15 and shoot up their classmates.
Yeah.
But I see on the comments, Sir Clerk has a couple of really good comments, I'm thinking. Multi-generational workforce, how do you think diversity should be handled? And how do you recommend blending of generations in your opinion? I actually really like that comment. Just because the typical, like, the definitions that I gave you guys earlier is actually from a business class perspective that we've been talking about. And I actually really like that question. I think if you are going to be blending generational, you should understand how they work. You should understand how each generation works. Typically, baby boomers actually prefer to have like strong supervision. They prefer to be more committed to general working hours 9 to 5, and they want to increase participation amongst everyone else. And millennials are also seeking teamwork and job security, and they want a work-life balance, which I think is very important. And I mean, I'm a millennial, so... And if you can figure out how to incorporate those things into your businesses, I think that would be a very good way to actually get that going. And obviously, like, every person is different, every business is different, so it needs to play along with how your business is being run and how your organization is being run.
So would you say almost that, at least for me, Dad brought up a very good point. I think if you want to at first attack the problem, it goes back to the idea of prejudice or preconceived notions. So a good one for the military, because military generations really do define how we see each other. So, for example... Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just saying, the diversity question in this place is, it's ignored. It's, you know, you start with diversity, you start with women and how the glass ceiling, that's where it starts. And then you talk about people of color, and the why you would hire somebody versus not hire somebody. Not to even mention, we didn't even get into affirmative action, that if you take government money, you have to have so many
EEO laws.
EEO and so many people of color in your, and then smart CEOs, especially if you deal in an inner city target population where half your client, like you're in a counseling center, half your client druggies are African American. Well, you should have maybe half of your staff should be African American. The problem with that sometimes becomes is that you can't find anybody with the necessary credentials to be part of your staff because the system in and of itself says you have to have this license or that piece of paper so we can hire you. Now, the other thing about just companies in general, if your CEO is not on board, if you just would take your SOP and look at it, you'd see that it's loaded with prejudicial comments. Just making the statement, you deal with it. It's everything from like, if I'm telling a racist joke to my person next to me and somebody else hears it and they get upset with it, I should be reported and I should be dealt with. And everything from how you deal with it in diversity training and calling anybody. And this not only goes just for people of color, sex, religion, race, all of that. Handicaps, physical handicaps are really ignored. Is your facility you're at handicap accessible?
ADA qualifications.
Yeah, have they been there? Are the ramps built? Are all the things they necessarily need? That all is there. Now, does that change in the generation? I think, yeah. I don't remember a lot of those places, but now I know that with all the advocates out there, we even got now second graders talking about climate change.
That's good and a bad thing almost.
Yeah. So the real, I don't know if they really know what's going on, or is it really mom's agenda? I
was going to say, I think you should let kids be kids, but that's my opinion. There's nothing wrong with nothing wrong with educating your child, but there's something to be said about making an adult's issue a child's issue.
Right, but the whole issue of diversity and the prejudice and the color gap is unbelievable. Well, look what happens when the cop shoots somebody and it's a person of another color. It's unbelievably crazy. Unbelievably.
I would agree. And I think one of the things that I wanted to personally tackle, at least for that comment when it comes to not necessarily limiting with this topic, but it sounds like, for one, as you just mentioned, a lot of these issues take place before people are even able to step in the door, before they're even able to apply for these jobs. But then realistically, as a military member, I can say this, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing, it can just is because it has happened to me numerous times. So being a younger airman, being a future NCO, what I've noticed a lot of the time being younger and being a millennial that I've had to deal with senior NCOs, senior officers, is that I have been branded to either be lazy or have it very easy in the military purely because I'm younger. Now, one thing I've always hated about that, besides I know they're just joking sometimes, is the fact that my age and the day I was born has nothing to do with anything that was within my control. I can't do anything about that. I can't change societal standards. I'm just here. That's just my opinion. I can't change that. I cannot change the way of which how we conduct ourselves fully. I can make contributions. I can't make decisions. It's way out of my hands. But I have been branded to be lazy, not because I actually am, mind you, but because of the fact I was born and I'm only 23 years old. I have been told I will be an ineffective NCO at my age purely because I grew up in the millennial generation and I'm too young to be an NCO. So one thing I want to address is, now in the common workplace and in the military, saying someone will not be an effective worker, be an effective leader, the only thing, in my opinion, you succeed in doing at that point is stunting motivation. What I mean by that is all you do is take the motivation away from that person to actually be effective. When you brand them prematurely before you even have the actual data to judge them. So if I just came up in a workplace, I just got hired on and say, you look lazy, you must be lazy. Yeah, you probably are terrible at your job. Why are you here? The only thing you succeed in doing, besides making yourself look stupid, is demotivating that individual. So if you really want to attack that issue, you need to stop basing everyone you meet purely off stereotypes and pre-existing notions. Because again, that's the only thing, in my opinion, you actually will accomplish is just upsetting people. But that's just me.
I kind of agree with Matt on that. I do get people who like think like younger people are like lazy and stuff. But for me, when someone say that, I am a person who like, okay, I will show you that I'm not that. I'm more than what you think of me. So for me, it was a little bit opposite of what you said. But
it should be motivation to get better, but some people let it defeat them because they think nothing I do will prove myself to this person purely because they were willing to judge me before I even got a chance to do anything about it.
Right.
So I can understand why for some people that would defeat them before they even got a chance. But maybe that's just me. I would say purely that it doesn't matter what the effect is to the individual that's being said to. The issue is the person that's saying it shouldn't be saying that period anyway.
Right, true.
You shouldn't make the excuse that the person should just deal with it better. That's like being offensive purely for the sake of being offensive and saying you shouldn't just take it that way. No, you should be accountable for what you're saying. So that's just my opinion, though.
So actually, I wanted to comment on that because that's one of the things that gets me so fired up. I have a professor, and to save face, I'm not going to mention his, but
do not know.
He
no names.
has no names. He has said to my class that we are lazy and entitled and spoiled, and that we're never going to amount to anything, and most of us are probably never going to graduate college. And I struggle with that because that turns into a self-fulfilling prophecy when you start believing that. And especially with our generation having more mental health problems, that self-fulfilling prophecy is, hey, well, if everyone thinks I'm a piece of crap, I might as well just be a piece of crap. So I definitely struggle with that. My one professor has just consistently this whole semester, and we're on the 8th week of classes, he has just been horrendous to my class. He actually made a comment that kind of makes me laugh about millennials. Millennials do not know how to use technology. We only know how to use social media. Do with that what you will.
I seriously disagree. To put it bluntly, to put it very bluntly, I wholeheartedly disagree. Now, you could argue that the older generation is making the current generation of technology purely because they're in a position to do so, having the training, having the positional stance to do it. The older generation has to be making this current technology purely because they're in a position to do so. However, when you create technology like this, you're also inadvertently training the next generation to take your place. Because one thing to keep in mind is just, there has never been a generation in history, feel free to disagree with me, but I don't think you can, where it's never been easier to learn. If you want to learn anything, YouTube, Google. It's never been easier to be almost, keyword here, anything you want to be. So realistically, when people say that you can't or won't amount to anything, well, first of all, you're making a generalization, and that just makes you look ignorant. But when you say things like that millennials don't know how to use technology, I cannot count on my actual amount that I can count to realistically on my own before getting bored, tired, or hungry, the amount of times that I have been asked by someone older than myself that is in the generation prior to me, hey, how does this piece of technology, this phone, this computer work? And the answer is so obliviously easy that it makes me chuckle internally, but I'm not going to hurt someone's feelings. But you get my point that when you have things like this, I have my experience and he has his. But notice the difference is the difference of opinion. But I'm not making a coverage like he is, right? So there's something to be said about saying everyone and then me personally. Anecdotal evidence isn't great, but in a situation like this, it works, at least in my opinion, because I know for a fact that that's just not true, purely on what's happened to me alone. And anecdotal evidence doesn't need to be disputed, because I'm sure you guys can believe me when I say that. I'm not saying that I one-off flew 200 miles and save the world and then just say, believe it because I said it. I'm saying I help someone older than me with technology. It doesn't seem that unfeasible, does it?
Yeah.
Right.
So, that's my point. So I just have a hard time believing that. But I actually would like to hear Dad's opinion on that professor. Or why do you think he thinks that way? Or is he correct in thinking that?
Well, there was some truth in what he was saying. You don't know, but you know social media. So he's giving you credit for social media. He's not giving you credit for the other stuff you do. The other thing could be is the professor is just lazy. He's just a lazy SOB. I know that when I went to college, many professors couldn't run the AV equipment. So they had somebody come in to run it for them during class. And that was, run the film or whatever it was. Nowadays, you plug and play. Now, some professors are with it and some aren't with it. Some want to retire and collect their money and go home at night. And some don't even teach. They give it to the grad assistants. So it kind of depends on the professor and where your head is and what you want to do. To me, it was film strips and not 8mm, but 16mm movies, because I was one of those AV guys in college. Our professors, we'll talk about professor. Are they lazy sometimes? Yes. Do they think they walk on water sometimes? Yes. I can only speak for myself. When a professor I had in stats came on like a drill sergeant, a bunch of us went to the dean and he got replaced. Now, maybe my generation has the guts to say, you can't do that to me, and they're going to stand up to that right away. I don't know if millennials do that, or to me, it's not a millennial thing. If you're afraid of the professor and you're afraid of what he might do and the consequences, well, to me, you got to take that step up and do what you got to do.
Oh, here's the kicker to that statement, to quickly reiterate here.
I'll let you go. I'll let you go, Martin.
I think I already know where you're going to go with it, Steve. This is the thing. If a millennial were to stand up for himself, the retort is going to be, you're just being soft because you're a millennial. Grow up and deal with it. That's the retort I commonly hear is, if you're being mistreated, you're just being soft because you're a millennial, get over it. Now, granted, there are some things where that could ring true, yes, but on the whole, I have to say that that's a little ridiculous.
I was actually gonna bring up an example of this with a professor that both Flo and I have had, where we went to take a class and the more than about 70% of the total students who took the class did not pass it. And after going to the dean, nothing happened. And according to the consensus of other professors in the department and the students that have taken the class and the students that have passed and that have not have passed in this class, is that the professor simply had enough tenure to just BS his way through the appeal process and the problem with it, because he had enough
tenure
pull
Whatever with that
department that he could skate on by without any real repercussions for letting 70% of his students that semester fail. And going on what you were going to say, Matt, I will say the idea that I have heard it where every generation thinks they have it worse than the next.
Yes.
And in some cases, that is very true. Mm-hmm. We didn't have to deal with Vietnam. We didn't have to deal with World War II. But we deal with the age of information. We deal with cyberbullying. We've dealt with 9/11, the world on terrorism, many different things. It's school shootings. I mean, it's all comparative. When you zoom out from it, you're just looking at one tragedy versus another, and you're trying to say who effed up the worst. But I mean,
Dad.
Going on that, I was gonna say, because I've had parents and professors and other students even come up to me and say, "Oh, you're soft," and "Oh, if you don't do things like me, you're soft and you're weak, and everyone needs to toughen up, and we won't have these problems anymore. And I just think that's really not true, in the idea that if you just get thicker skin, that's going to convince the kid next to you not to bring an AK-47 and shoot up your school. That's not how that works.
The only thing I was going to say is the advantage, I think, this generation, I didn't get a cell phone till quite a while. My track phone was it for a long time. When I got the new, what did I get, a Note 4? Samsung Note 4. Ooh, yeah. I thought I died and went to heaven because I wasn't used to the video and the pictures. But nowadays, if somebody's working you over or screwing you up and they're in front of you, you pull out the thing, put the camera on, say it again. What did you want to say to me? Did you really want to do that to me? You look now at the tragedy, you got 10 people pulling out their cell phones. Yeah. I wish I had a cell phone back in the day when people were acting stupid towards you, because that stops it dead in its tracks. Now, I'm sure you could videotape this professor in the class. No. So when he does this,
he will not. You have to actually sign off a contract. So
you have to sign a contract.
Wow. So he has this: no electronics are allowed in the classroom unless you're on your computer taking notes. If you are taking notes on your computer, your computer must be facing me so I can see at all times what you are doing. And not only that, but he also I remember we had a student who was blind, so she would videotape the lessons. She had to get his consent every single class to videotape the lessons.
That's a lot.
Like extra audio record.
Now, what does that say to you about that professor?
He's trying to cover his ass.
He knows
pardon my language.
He knows he's screwing up.
Yeah.
And he has just continued to get away with it. See, I think the thing was, when he first started there in 1988, he was probably an okay professor, but he has literally done the same lesson plan over and over and over and over, and he has not changed a single thing
besides
to go along. Besides
the textbook, because the new editions were.
But it's still the same, by the same author, and it's the same type of textbook. It's just it has a few more appendices in it. But he was not using. I got hundreds of points taken off for using 8th edition APA formatting because he wanted 2nd edition APA formatting.
Which tells you he's now with the times.
So when it came time to evaluate the professor at the end of the semester, he got crucified by everybody.
Yeah, pretty much. 21 out of the 26 students failed his class. And that was just my class. He has 5 sections.
And I'm sorry, but when that many students fail, you cannot say that it's a student's fault. When the majority, 70% of your kids fail, clearly that there's an issue beyond the students, whatever it may or may not be. I just have to say that.
Yeah.
Can I just play the other side in defense of the professor?
Sure.
That's maybe. Well, this is just students in general, because I've been on the other side. A professor, when you give your test, you have to keep 4 or 5 copies of the test where you give an A to an F. You have to copy those, take those in and prove, so you can, when you can prove your bell curve of why you give so many people. Now, have I had classes where there were a lot of D people and a couple Fs there? Because people didn't want to really do the work or pay attention or something, and you ask them, yes, that could happen. It's rare, but it could happen. Now, depending on the class and who the people are. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, something's wrong when all those people pass. Now, either the professor doesn't want to grade down or grade to the majority, the medium of the class. That's what the professor
the learning curve.
The curve, right. The dean usually says, can you drop the curve down a little bit so you get more D's, if you will, than F's. So these people will pass, because, man, that really screws your grade point up.
The only thing is, with this professor in particular, So this is our effective speaking class. His first speech is 750 points. His second speech is worth 1,500 points, and he has 4 exams, each worth only 100 points. So it doesn't matter how you do on those exams. If you fail one or both of those speeches, you're screwed. You fail 100% right there. But there is no way 21 out of 26 people should have failed.
Right.
I know, like I said, I had this same professor, and I skated by the hair of my teeth. I mean, it was very, very close, and he's a very harsh grader, and in some opinions, he's an unfair grader, simply because I lost 150 points because I didn't make eye contact with him during my second speech, which ironically enough was actually on millennials. But in actuality, I stared at him for an entire minute of a 12-minute speech, and he didn't look up from his laptop to meet my eyes once. And I had other students say the same exact thing, and we put that on our review of him, and we thought that part of the syllabus for that speech, the guidelines for that speech, was unfair and incorrect, simply because he was focusing so hard on taking his notes, or I doubt he'd do this on purpose, but it almost felt like he purposely wasn't meeting our eyes.
Yes, and not only that, but I remember I got 200 points taken off because I had the flashcards in my left hand instead of in my right hand.
That's
what does that matter?
Right. It's just we're getting off topic here. Just venting about professor. But
just about the professor.
Yeah. What do you?
When I went to college, one of the first classes I took was how to stay in college. And one of the things they talked about was, are you aware of the politics that go on in the classroom? The way the professor operates, what kind of grader he is, what kind of thing like that. So when you're having trouble with a professor, and so maybe this was my generation, because maybe people don't want to meet with the professor, I would meet with my professor, every professor, at least once during the semester. Because one of the things you want to do is, how am I doing? What do you want with this? How does this go? If you want this, and you got to find out what the professor wants, because he's basically holding his life in your hands somewhat, because with the grades.
Yep.
So he figured it out. He says, left hand, the right hand. Well, why do you want it in the right hand versus the left hand? I think that's a reasonable question, but you have to ask them. I think people of my generation, the baby boomers, when there's a problem, we go out of our way to fix our own problem and fix ourselves to get it done. We always don't go at the system to fix our problem. We go from ourselves. It's like when I was working and I was having a problem in dealing with somebody, I would go to my supervisor. What kind of training can I get to help deal with this person? What kind of book do I need to read? It was about me improving myself to get better. If you complain about the system, nothing gets done. Because you can't change the system.
Right.
You can complain about it. You can sometimes, if they really, really screw up and you catch them and you can prove it, then you can change the system that way. But that's few and far between, because most people know how to cover themselves.
Well, that almost reminds me of and you can definitely attest to this, Mr. Dad, is the idea of of your leadership chain or your chain of command. Usually, the thing that we're told about in the military always is solve it at the lowest level first. So the question for you two, did you actually ask, why should the cards in the hand matter? Where should they matter? Why? What is the point of that? Because to me, on paper, ironically, that sounds nonsensical and serves no purpose. It doesn't, realistically.
Right.
But did you actually did you actually ask and say, why does this matter to you? Or realistically, why should this matter at all? It's just because it matters to you as a teacher where you think cards should be doesn't mean it affects anything else outside of where you just believe hands or cards should be in my hand.
Well, I taught a class, and when you put something on a board, you say, this is the way this theory works, and this is the answer I'm looking for on a test. Not the one you want to give me, I'm not looking for your opinion. I'm looking for this answer. Now, you can write your opinion, but you will get an F for that because this is the answer I want. And I'll tell you what I'm looking for because the test is really regurgitating information to see if you got it in your head. So that's the reason. When you're very clear and very specific on what you want, professor, you don't have that problem. Now, Steven's waving at me about something. He wanted to know.
One of the
industries have I worked in?
Industries.
Okay.
Yes. I
was a clinical supervisor in an addiction clinic for about 35 years. So I dealt with mostly, well, I was also the parole expert too. So it was like psychopaths, degenerates, among your cocaine heads and all that other kind of stuff. So part of the issues there were in supervision of that is not letting them get to your head and be manipulated, more so with the probation and parole people. But just addiction in general is a tough racket. When we met supervision-wise, it was at least once a week. That was a minimum. I met with my supervisor once a week, and I was the supervisor, but I met with all my people, and I had 5 to 7 staff that I supervised, and I had to meet with them at least once a week, minimum of an hour. And it was just stuff in general. It doesn't matter how well you were trained, what your social work degree is, your PhD, whatever, you're still meeting with me because we got to discuss things, and it's got to kind of do, I don't want to say my way, but the correct way, because the other side of it is, besides clinical, I have a liability responsibility to protect the company, that you don't do anything stupid, and that you do all your work and things. It's just watching and doing that kind of stuff. But are there people that get manipulated? Do staff get hurt? Is diversity a big issue in a counseling practice? You bet. The other issue would be, for example, is if you're an African American and you have a white female counselor and he comes on to you, what are you going to do? How do you deal with those issues? How many, if you got attacked by some African Americans and you get them as your clients, are you going to be able to deal with it? Those are all questions that need to be worked out. Now, if you want to be a better counselor, you go get therapy yourself. You get some training. How do I deal with this? How do I do that? And then you keep working on yourself all the time. You can go to your boss and say this and that, and the boss says, you're the supervisor, fix it. So you have to search out. Now, for me, the big thing was the internet, because I could go online and type this. Before, I was saying, in the old days, I had to go to books, and that's a real pain in the butt and a long time to find the right answer. Especially when you're teaching somebody, you have to show them because they want to see it. They want to see it. The other thing, I'll make a prejudicial statement here, more with clerical staff and supervision and stuff. When I had baby boomer secretaries that were ladies that were a little older, who kind of been around, 20 years typing, doing one thing. And then I got, they eventually left, they retired, so I had to hire new secretaries. And Brian and Stratton, a local secretarial college right across the street. So I go over, I said, send me some people. He sent me people, and the secretaries I had were like typing 60, 70 words a minute. To pass the typing test there was 25 words a minute. 20, that's to pass the course. And I said, you have anybody who type 50 words or more? Because I can type 25. So why would I hire you as a secretary? Especially when I got a computer, I can type that fast. Okay. Now, the example I'm giving, you have to, and they were millennials. I would give them a letter to type. They would type the letter. And I say, this has got to go out in the mail. So they type the letter, give it back to me. And I ask them, where's the envelope? You didn't tell me where the envelope is. You have to tell them every little thing. Now, as a supervisor, I learned my lesson, and I did tell them everything. When you initially came in, the 8-page single line check mark, put your initials by it that I told you, came out. So when you didn't do something, I just pull out the sheet and go, there you go. Now, to me, I didn't have to do that with I'll say baby boomers, because baby boomers to me always wanted to look busy. It's like if you were in the shop and you weren't working, what you would do is pick up a broom and kind of clean, pretend you're busy. You felt guilty if you did look busy. If you weren't working, because you felt guilty about taking the money, just sitting there. Millennials have no problem doing that, or even pulling out their phone. I work at a restaurant on Friday nights, and when the waitresses are not busy, they'll take their phones and do the phone. I don't know what they're doing, social media, I guess, or they take phone calls. And I'm like, you're working. I'm paying you. Why are you on the phone? Well, it's important. Not if you're working. It's not that important. Is somebody dying? No, they're not important. So I want to get off my soapbox. I don't want to take up too much time. I feel like I'm just talking too much. I'll stop.
Well, so to come back on that statement just a little bit, this is a counter
Sure.
that I have to that. So one thing when it comes to they want direction, would you rather they do nothing in response to having direction, or say, I didn't know what I was supposed to do, but at least they're coming to you and saying, hey, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but I would like direction. So there's a difference between, in my opinion, not having direction and being lazy as a result, and not having direction but still being willing to do so. And this is another thing too. A lot of older military members, especially the higher in rank you get, and even in the normal workplace, people feel that once you get older, you have an entitlement to be lazy. So there has been something said about, older sergeants, older officers, that they feel they're above certain things purely because of their age, how long they've been in, or the rank that they hold. And I know, based on my previous jobs, that I've helped older people that will not do what they deem a menial task purely because of their age. And they were people that had worked there less time on paper than me. They were older than me, sure, but on paper, they worked there less than I did, but I had to do it purely because I was the younger one of age. So it goes both ways. I have met older people who will not do something purely because I'm older or I'm a sergeant and I don't have to.
Well,
and leave it to the younger generation, which...
Well, to me, there's a clear distinction here you're not making. One is, when you have rank, you're in charge. When you do that in a civilian world, it doesn't happen that way. When you get a line, like I'll say, did you do your work? And it's not done, and you know it's not done. And they say something like, I'm doing the best I can. Now, when somebody's older, whose responsibility is to do this job, and they don't do it, what's the repercussions? The supervisor needs to take the bull by the horns, as they say, or the bull by the tail, and face the situation. So that's what you're doing. Is he doesn't want to do it? He's older. He gets written up, for lack of a better way of putting it, depending on your situation. But just because he's older doesn't mean, if you're in charge, you're the supervisor, it's your responsibility. And if he was directed to do that, there are people who get directed, who get a written notice what they're screwing up in and what they're supposed to do, and they still screw up. You know what happens? They're not working for us anymore.
Right.
You only get 2 or 3 tries.
In the military,
now, in the military, it's a different story.
It's different because, A, you can't just fire someone. The process to kick somebody out, unless it's a war crime, takes months. It takes months to kick somebody out, unless they did something heinous, right? But the reason I say that is because there are people of my own rank that will not do things purely because of their age. They're not in charge, is my point. Now, the older ones that do have rank that feel they should do something, I have held older people that are older than they are and have more rank that will do those things. So my point is just that, in my opinion, no one is above anything. Everyone should at least be willing to do something. Now, I don't ever expect to see a colonel mopping and sweeping. I don't ever expect to see that. If I do, in my opinion, something's wrong. But the thing about it is that, at least for me, no one should say they're above everything. If you are willing to demonstrate the ability to do the things that you would like your subordinates to do, you motivate them more to want to work for you, because on paper, you demonstrate that while you are in charge of them, you are still willing to go to their level to work and assist them. So there is something to be said, in my opinion, about lowering yourself, quote unquote, to what you would deem subordinate work or airman or private work. Do you know what I mean?
Well, but that's not in the military. I agree in civilian world, yes. Civilian world, yeah. Not in the military. When you're a sergeant, an E7 or a senior NC, they're not going to do it. They're not going to demonstrate. They'll get somebody to demonstrate.
I completely disagree. And the reason I say that is because it is more common now than ever before. Because when you have a generation now that wants more direction, I have seen and I haven't, like what I mean by haven't is I have seen people that aren't willing to do it, but I have seen older ones that are willing to do these things and have done it before. I have seen it before. It's fairly common, and a lot of them take pride in doing it because they know that they're assisting and mentoring this new generation and how they understand how they learn. So when you say it doesn't happen in the military, I think you're judging that based purely off your experiences during the times where you were in or at that time. Now, it's also branch-based, right? Now, we all know how the jokes about the Air Force, we all know the jokes about the Coast Guard, things like that. It goes back to the idea of generational, and military generations from civilian generations also differ greatly. I mean, if I met a World War II vet in his prime versus me now, I'd probably get my rear end kicked and made fun of. Let's be real here. But it's joking aside, that's the point, though, is I think that you are correct to an extent that you say they aren't, but it's wrong too because I have seen it before. And it's only that I think you're judging it purely off what you experienced at your time and me now. So it goes like based on back in your day, ironically, yes. In my day, no. So it goes both ways.
May I interject?
Yes.
Is that okay? I mean, I can't speak like military versus civilian wise, but my uncle, he worked at BOCES for 36 years, and he worked his way all the way up to the top, tip top. And he got so much more respect from the people he was training that because he would show them how to do it and not belittle them while showing them how to do that. And I definitely feel that it's very important to, like, if you're going to be training someone, you should be willing to show them, like, what to expect. I don't think you can just be like, here's this task, and then literally leave them hanging by a thread, because they're not going to know exactly what to do. And my uncle, even though he doesn't work there, he is still one of the most respected people ever in that organization because of all of the respect he gained from helping every single person, building his way up from the top, and actually caring and showing that, yes, I know what it takes to do X, Y, and Z. And this is how I suggest you do it because this is the easiest way to do it. So, you know.
I was gonna jump in on that. I got two things. One, going off of what Dad and Flo both just said, from my own personal experience, this is just my personal experience. I've worked at companies where I went in, mind you, I'm not a manual type of person. I do mostly computer things. I'm studying network administration. I'm gonna have a desk job my entire life. I went into a manual labor field at a factory nearby, and they did recycling. They unloaded trucks and dumped it into a hole and crushed it up and put it on another truck. I walked into that and never seeing that type of environment before, I was confused as how they did things, and then they treated me as I was stupid for asking questions. Mm-hmm. So there's certainly, in my opinion at least, there's a bias towards how like things are done and how people react to those things. Whereas like in my case, like if it's someone's first day there and they ask how things are done, like in my case, don't treat them like they're stupid. And if someone or myself doesn't do something right,
don't jump
down their throats and treat them like they're the spawn of the Antichrist. I mean, because that's not gonna really get you a good working, productive member of the staff.
It goes back to my idea of. Sorry to cut you off. It goes back to the idea of demotivating people. Remember what I said earlier, that if you treat someone as if they aren't worth their salt, the only thing you succeed in doing is creating someone who doesn't have work ethic because you've already shown that you're not someone they want to work for. Because in my opinion, it goes back to the idea of a boss versus a leader, someone who tells you what to do and someone who shows you what to do.
Yep.
And that's,
I just go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, just the place where Stephen worked. If you have, I would say, old baby boomers working, and you get millennials in there, baby boomers on a physical work site are, how should I say it, filthy in terms of their moral character when they talk to each other. What you might construe as they're picking on you is really their way of good nature fun.
Right.
And it's but if you're doing your job, unless you're crying when you're doing, they're like, what's the thing here? You just give it back to them if you can. Now, if you can't, that's another issue.
The supervisor in my case.
Yeah, but even if the supervisor jumps on your case, it's like, what do you...
First day on the job, you get screamed at for not knowing how things go.
Right.
I'd say no matter what generation you're from, instead of just be like, hey, this goes over here, like, just know next time. Or, like, have the razzing or the playful banter, as you might put it, after you give the lesson, instead of make them feel like garbage and then tell them what they did wrong, because then you're just demoralizing them. Whereas, like, in my case, as I learned, what my dad said in many cases was true. In other cases, it was just a plain hostile environment, where my supervisor would come and he'd give me flack for not doing something right or whatnot. And as I worked there, I started to realize that for the most part, he was just playfully bantering around, which I have no problem with. But
Do you remember the anger definition?
yes, yeah.
Can you just share that? Because I know this gets Steve through some things.
But for me, this is something I really want to say before I lose this thought. Sorry to cut you off. You need to establish that rapport before you start insulting or having that playful banter. That's like me joking with someone I don't know and saying, that shouldn't offend you, I'm playing around. How am I supposed to know that, or how are they supposed to know I'm joking around?
Yes.
And you can't use a generational method of communication.
Yes, that is definitely a generational thing.
But the thing is, you cannot use that as a defense. In my opinion, you can't, because that's.
I'm not condoning it.
Right, that's what I'm trying to say. Is just that's like me saying, because I was born in this generation, I automatically assume you're stupid with technology. Right? I cannot use you being older in your generation as an excuse for me making fun of you purely because I'm from the generation of technology. It doesn't work that way. So then picking on Steve and then disguising it as that's how they talk to each other, sure. But it's a lazy defense. I know you're not actually defending them, but if they were to use that as the excuse, it's lazy, because you're trying to basically absolve yourself of the fact that you actually cannot communicate to the younger generation, or you have not established that rapport. So to me, it's a lazy supervision, and it's being just, again, out of words, just lazy altogether.
Yeah. Right. Yes.
Just real quick, what does Darcy think about this? She realized said anything.
Sorry. I was like, I'm listening to you guys, but can I go back to Dad for a little bit? He was saying that he worked at a restaurant on like a weekend or something, and how all the waitress or like the waiter like always go on their phone. I work at a restaurant too, and I see it. Like, my parents kind of own the restaurant, so technically I'm kind of in charge when I'm there. And I'm the same age as everyone, the other waitress and waiter. But the problem is, like, I know what I'm doing. And like, when I tell them, hey, you need to roll the spoon, you need to clean the table, or you need to do your side job, they're just like, oh yeah, we'll do it later. 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, they still haven't do it. And then I'm just here like, I just told you to do something. And then they're like, you're being mean. I'm like, I'm not being mean. I'm telling you to do something, and you're still on your phone. Like,
well,
that's
who's in charge? Are you in charge?
Okay.
Oh yes, kind of.
Well, no, kind of. They need to know who the boss is, and the boss in my opinion, a boss in a restaurant is the person who has the thing to look at you and go, "You're fired." Now, where I work, that's real clear. You give the boss an issue, because we had a lady who was there 20 years, and he threw her out. She gave him some back talk, and he threw her out. It's the boss,
Right. Yeah.
Now they'll give you a chance, like, can you please do this and do this, but after a while it gets stupid.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sure, in a restaurant, some people, or the other things talk about diversity and sexism. The manager who abuses waitresses and like, let's date, let's go out, do this or do that, otherwise you can't get this. I mean, I think the sexism in the restaurant business is unbelievable.
Really? Well,
It's one thing if you're a bartender and you're flirting with customers because you're trying to get tip, but when you're a waitress and you're getting abused, I mean, you know what I mean? It's like you serve the drinks and guys are pinching you as you go by. That kind of nonsense. That's got to be dealt with, immediately.
That should 100% be dealt with. And I don't know if you guys have actually seen, there was a post recently on Facebook where someone commented to the owner of a restaurant or a bar or something and said that the waitresses need to show more skin.
Okay.
And
that's like a no at my workplace. Like, if you're wearing a low-cut shirt, I'm sorry, honey, you're gonna have to go to Target and buy a new shirt next door. Like,
yeah, and they actually asked the man who made that comment to leave, and they are donating money to the National Sexual Abuse Hotline and stuff like that. And that's how I think that should be dealt with. Coming from someone, I worked off campus. There was this place in town, and I was 17 years old working by myself at night. I was to have my cell phone with me, and I will say more than once I was sexually harassed by people, and I was 17 years old and could not to have anyone come stay with me. So I definitely feel like that's...
I would just break the rules at that point. I mean...
after the third time of someone reaching across
after the
bar,
first time even.
Does it get thrown out?
It was rough.
Does the person get thrown out?
I was 17. I was the only person there. I was working by myself.
There was nobody else there.
He called the police. He harassed you. He assaulted you.
I'm not allowed to, as my wonderful boss had put it, I am not allowed to drive away the customers. If they do something I don't like, I better just suck it up.
That's a hostile work environment. Like, 100%.
I would at that point.
So would you say almost, this is a good question for Dad actually here. So when you have men that act like that, so I'm sure Steve can agree with me. Mentally, I cannot imagine talking to a woman like that unless it was my significant other and I was playing around. Like, I could not imagine talking to a woman like that.
How long have you been married?
I'm not.
I'm sorry.
It's a joke. It's a joke.
It's a joke. It's a joke.
But my point being is just that I can't mentally wrap my head around talking to a woman I don't know like that. Would you almost say that's a generational thing where the way men would treat women has, not unfortunately, I don't want to say that because that just sounds bad, but the way they treat women has bled into this current generation, and the current generation of women don't agree with it. And in my opinion, I don't either. So would you say that, not to make excuses for them, but would you say that their upbringing has reflected or has bled into how they treat women now?
Oh, yes, no question about it. A jerk is a jerk is a jerk. To me, I know a lot of baby boomer jerks, and I know a lot of millennial jerks. The issue, though, I think with millennials sometimes is you don't know any better, and you sometimes say something stupid, but you don't realize you said it. You say something to a woman, and it's offensive, but you don't know it's offensive. And I think sometimes that's, if you will, especially in a learning issue, like when you're saying something, but you really don't, like you're trying out a new line or something, trying to put the move on somebody. So you're trying a line out and it's really offensive, but it doesn't cross your mind, because if you don't have friends like Flo, you can run lines by saying that's okay, that's not okay, because you can get real offensive real quick with women. There's no question about it. They take it the wrong way. I mean, on work, the harassment issue came to the point. I had a 70-year-old secretary who came in with a suit, a new suit, nice suit, because she looked good. And I said, "You look very nice today." And somebody else heard it and reported me for harassing her.
What?
Now, how silly can you get? That's going to the other extreme. But I got called on a carpenter, said, "Gary, don't do that," because I've been there a long time. So they said, "Just Gary, don't do that."
I would say that's a third party getting involved when they don't need to.
But that's the diversity issue.
Right.
If it had been something else, like if you had gone over and
put your arm around her, like hit her on
I can't remember.
That's
I
the
got reported
problem.
for something like that.
People-
It's like you're just making a compliment. It's like, geez.
Yeah, but depending on how they call it, the SOP is written, they're saying to me here, well, you didn't put your arm around you. Well, that's assault, technically.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem where I only hugged her. I didn't grab her butt.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, well, maybe next time you will. The problem, you can't do anything. You have to stop. And the other thing that I have a big is if you're a man and somebody's really getting abused and you don't step in, you're as guilty as he is, who's doing the harassment.
And also,
But at the
what
same
type of man
time,
are you
they
if
might-
you're gonna let
The
that
victim
happen?
might drag you into that, and that's why some men fear they don't want to get involved simply because they're going to have the rape charge put on them as well for trying to help.
How
Yeah,
do you get a rape
unfortunately-
charge trying to help somebody?
Because
If
in
you
in
bump
that
into
mental
her and
state,
she's not in a good mood, and you have
yeah.
a let's say let's theoretical example here. A man is harassing a woman, and another guy comes in and punches the guy in the face and pushes him away and asks the woman, are you okay? And then the woman's just like, oh my god, get away from me, you creep. You don't know her, she doesn't know you, she doesn't know the guy harassing her, but because she said that, suddenly you're the bad guy.
Or
First of all,
what
why
did you
didn't even
just
say
did you just
thank
save
you?
me?
I feel like, oh my god.
Right.
Did you just
Mhm.
save me
And-
because now you think I'm going to be grateful for you or
Right.
whatever, things like that?
Right, like people make assumptions about why
What your
people,
motives are.
You can't be good just to be good anymore. You always have to have an ulterior motive.
Well,
But that's not always the case.
Right.
I mean, like,
But that's what many people
Are
will
afraid
think.
of. Yeah.
That's what people are afraid of.
and also, I mean, like, if there's a large group of people seeing someone get assaulted or something, they're all thinking someone else is going to step in, someone else is going to
Right.
call the cops, and then that person. There's a very famous.
Someone says you punched them? Not that.
no, you missed.
There's
The
a
phone,
very
yeah.
famous
I'll let you finish.
psychological experiment that was done because of a horrible. This woman was getting the ever-living crap beat out of her by her boyfriend, significant other, whatever he was, and it was in broad daylight, and she ended up dying from the injuries right there on the lawn in front of their house. And everybody else was like, oh, well, I thought you were going. I thought you were. I thought someone else already called the cops. That's why I didn't. So, I mean, that's also another big thing that people need to keep in mind. Everyone has that, like, oh, it's not completely my problem. I don't have to step in.
You don't have to do anything, but if you don't want to be responsible, that's okay. The other side of this is we're worried about what to say. Again, pull your cell phone out. I wish I had that cell phone option. Film somebody beating up somebody, because a film don't lie, and all the cops that get nailed is when they got a videotape of somebody. Rodney King didn't get his money because they had a nice video of him.
Mm-hmm.
So they took care of that, but you have to get involved. Are you a type of person that you want to see do what's right? What kind of backbone do you have? Are you going to take a chance? Are you going to get burned a little? Yes. Is it going to take effort on your part? Yes. I'm not saying get beat up, but I'm saying call 911. If it gets out of hand, you can run. You can, you do what you can. You don't get yourself hurt, but you do what you can to help the situation.
I think one of the funny things is I've seen that experiment done in a different kind of way, and not nearly with the unfortunate end result is. I think Steve has probably seen this video too.
Mm-hmm.
Flo, you probably have. It's the idea. Remember, I saw this video where a man was. It was acting. This didn't really happen. A man was somewhat harassing a woman in public or groping her, putting her hands on her, and somewhat hitting her. Combining all the worst things a man can do in public to get the reaction. More often than not, pretty much every time actually, someone else typically stepped in, hopefully, and did something about it, pushed the guy off. They said, "Hey, we're just it's acting, it's whatever." But when a woman was doing it to a man,
I saw it.
no one reacted. Everyone just let it be. So there's something to be said about that too, at least in my opinion.
Oh, I just have another story about that. I used to bounce in a bar, and you're at the door, and you have a lady comes in, and she goes, "Is so and so here?" And he's here on the end of the bar. So she runs in on the end of the bar and she starts wailing on him. Now, as she's wailing on him, smacking him, picks up a bottle and wants to hit him. As the bouncer, you're supposed to stop somebody from being harassed. Well, he's my husband, you son of a bitch. What are you doing with this woman? Oh, pardon me, I swore. Sorry.
Sorry.
That was only for effect. And basically it was, as the bouncers, we didn't interfere. We just step back, make sure nobody else jumps in, and let them do their domestic fight right there. And then we kind of ease them out because you don't want anybody else to become involved. So are there times where you maybe don't get involved? You just kind of monitor and move it along? Yes. For me, that was my experience of, yes, you really don't do anything.
I think that more or less, that specifically, that scenario, that's situational, and that's husband and wife, and
right.
That comes with age and time, and like a lifelong stream of issues that you might not be able to solve.
Well, I can only speak for New York.
Right.
In New York, when it's called domestic and the cops go, somebody's going to jail.
It's 75 to 95% of the time, it's the man.
Yeah, most of the time it's the guy, right?
The man.
Yes, but somebody's going to jail around here. There's no ifs, ands, or buts, so it's going to be solved.
Like the actual law.
Yeah, that's the law. That's the law. Domestic. There's a question up on the board I saw. Drug addiction is a huge issue. How do you feel about addiction issue? Is that something we want to go to or not bother?
I think that's
because I can give you a generational.
If we want to move it to keep it somewhat on topic for the generations, yeah, we can do that. But try to keep it relative to our overall topic.
Yeah, I would say that the older criminals, baby boomers, were not as violent. You know, when you think of the movies, you see the mafia that they beat up on people. They do all that stuff like in the movies. But the generation now is very violent right up front, and they're younger. It's younger. What's the Z? What's the
Gen Z? Yeah.
The Gen Z
or Gen Y.
When you're 14 and you pull out a gun and you're running gang and you're running dope, and you come into the clinic and you're afraid somebody's going to shoot you, and it's not a paranoid feeling. Somebody really is trying to shoot you. It becomes a real issue, not only for you, but for staff and for everybody else. And it becomes a safety issue. But the violence that's happened is the criminals, the young guys now, in their late teens, early 20s, they're violent people, really violent people. By comparison to, I call it the old guys, because the druggies now, the young kids, when they do that coke,
they go wild.
They go crazy.
Wild. Yeah.
The old drunks, pour me another one. Make sure I don't fall on the floor.
Yep.
Take me to the drunk. They play with you.
Everyone wants to fight now, yeah.
But they're not violent. But now everybody but it's fighting with a gun. They pull out a gun.
That's like with I agree with that. There's countless like websites and there's countless places where like WorldStar where you can go and find videos of people arguing, fighting, pulling guns and knives out. And so I will say I agree with that.
I don't know if I agree with it completely though.
What's your thought on it, Flo?
And I'm just speaking from my own personal experiences, and I have had some really, really, really experiences.
Right.
I think alcoholics can be just as bad as cokeheads, and that's coming from someone who may or may not be relating to that topic.
Yeah, addiction is an addiction. Dopamine is released the same way. No matter what chemical you put in your body, your brain is gonna crave that dopamine.
Yeah.
Right.
And like my also like we're not as or baby boomers aren't as violent. Baby boomers had more serial killers.
I don't know.
Ted Bundy, Eileen Werner, Jeffrey Dahmer.
How old were they? They were. I don't think they were baby boomers.
No, they were like mid 60s
like
to 70s, like 50s.
Dahmer and that?
That's when their sprees were. Their sprees were in the 60s and 70s. They were probably 25, 30 years old, like somewhere around there.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think there's something to be said about the fact that the generations prior to us having more serial killers anyways, regardless of the generation they grew up in.
I mean, but also we have more school shooters rather than serial killers.
Yeah.
We have more domestic terrorist attacks than...
He was born.
It's violence just in different
1960,
forms.
Jeffrey Dahmer was.
Right. That's really what it is. It's violence in different forms.
But when you're real young and you're 17, you'll do a lot of crazy
But you're
things.
more hormonal rather
won't
than... You're more emotional and hormonal at some point.
But it's the
Your
fact that
brain
you'll
is not
do it when
developed
you're young.
until like
Oh,
you're
right.
25. So
25, yeah.
But this is something to keep in mind when it comes to serial killers versus the current generation of people who cause violence, whether it's school shooters, homegrown terrorism. There's a difference here. Terrorism has a definition that needs to be understood, and when it comes to that, it all goes back to doing it for a reason. Serial killers, typically speaking, did what they did purely for personal reasons or whatever they may or may not be. Sending a message didn't usually revolve around that. It was purely for their own needs. Terrorism has a purpose. It has a goal, usually political. And typically speaking, so does a school shooting, because someone wants to send a message. So there's something to be said about why they're doing it, as opposed to just the fact that it's violence. It's all violence. It doesn't matter what you look at, as violence has got a rigid definition here. But terrorism is often loosely defined. And there's something to be said about a serial killer versus a terrorist. And right now, in the current generation, we are seeing more terrorists, by definition, not realistically in this country, than serial killers. So where do you think that comes from?
That's just... I think it's...
Where does the terrorism come from?
So my question being is just that right now, at least in my opinion, we see more methods, we see more ideas being pushed by these acts of quote-unquote terrorism. Do you think it's literally because it's the age of technology that people do these things with goals in mind and not just killing for killing's sake or for the sake of violence? Why do you think that the form of violence has taken a change as opposed to just killing for killing's sake?
Oh, well, I don't know about killing for killing's sake, but you have to be pretty out there when you take somebody's life. You know, if you take a sociopath versus a psychopath, when you have, they call it sins of the flesh, you kind of cross the line, because it takes a lot to shoot somebody or stab somebody, especially if you're in the military. They talk about this. The first kill is the hardest. You know, when you actually plunge a knife into somebody or you actually shoot a live body, that's a real traumatic experience for most people. Once you get there and you do that a couple times, you get kind of cold-blooded, and then it becomes kind of a habit almost. Now, do I think that the internet and all the technology has helped that spur that nastiness and that terror and all that? Yeah. Also, if you look at the world and you look at religions across the world, there's a few religions that kind of spew this out. If you look, everything from the Middle East to like the Jewish Holocaust to all the fighting they did, everything from the Jewish Holocaust and the Crusades were over, where the Jews are going to be in their homeland. And then all that fight over World War II, and they're still fighting over Israel and the Gaza Strip and all that. So there's a lot of, I think, violence, yes, but I think a lot of it is by, this is my value, and I think and you're disguising it under religion. You're putting it under religion as why I'm doing this, the jihadist and all that. Because to me, the breakdown, I think somewhat, and I'll say this, I think there's a moral breakdown in a lot of ways. The breakdown of the family. It's not like it used to be. Mom and dad, you come home at 5 o'clock, you have supper, you sit around, you talk, and how's it going? How was school? How's work? Now you rarely have a family meal together. Right, Steve?
Yeah. I was gonna say, going off of that, how you said the internet, I think it makes it more connected, but also because the internet, we're in the age of technology, information, and communication. Everybody has access to it, so at some point or another, people just have become, over time, this is more of a generational thing, because they have access to quote-unquote violent materials, whether it be movies, pictures, TV, video games, anything like that. We become desensitized to horrific and gorish accidents and things that we see and it makes it, on a mental level, your brain perceives it as something that's quote unquote easier to do because you've witnessed it before. Not necessarily, not that it's necessary that you've done it before and that you become cold-blooded, but you witness it and you kind of perceive it not as your own, but as something that's it's almost normalized because it's just so prevalent.
So let me interject on this because
Sure.
I think I have something to definitely offer this situation. So, firstly, when it comes to this, I want to say that when it comes to violence and violence for violence's sake, it goes back to the technology, yes, but when I said earlier that it's never been easier to connect, it's never been easier to send a message. It's never been easier to spread these things. It infests like wildfire. So when you want to do something gory and attract attention, it'll be all over the news media in 2 hours. Everyone will be talking about it within 2 hours or the hour or 30 minutes.
I mean, look at the New Zealand shooting.
My point exactly is that everyone can and will know about something. So when you want to send a point, violence is the best way to send a point, realistically. And when it comes to being desensitized, so I'm going to get a little personal, and I'm doing that on purpose. As now, granted, I am not a frontline soldier. I have never had to actually physically take someone's life. But as someone who routinely deals and contributes to acts of what we call violence or extreme lethal warfare overseas, where my job is to see those operations over and contribute to them, where my work has directly led to the deaths of numerous people, there is something to be said about how that really does affect somebody else and where you go from there. So, for example, when you have people who actually have done the physical action of taking somebody's life, whether it be in the military where you were supposed to do it, you were just being a good soldier, just being a good Marine, whatever it may or may not be, where's your place after that? So the good thing about my situation is just that I have been able to contain it where my work is. But people who have been trained to do that, people who have had to deal with those things, and they come home and they're no longer getting a paycheck to do those things, where do they go? What do they do after that? Because when you're actually on paper supposed to be doing it, where do you go from there? Now, I know that almost makes me sound anti-military because I'm in it and I'm not, but it's awful to think about when those people get out, now not everyone does this, but there's something for them that they lose when those things happen. And again, I know it sounds ridiculous, and I'd imagine if I'm being laughed at, it's fine based on my experience in that field, but I mean it when I say my work has contributed to these things. I know it has. So I understand it to a point, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, my only comment is that, yes, it's a tremendous loss of power when that right is taken away from you and you actually liked it. Most people don't like it, but some people do like it. And if you get taken away from it, it's like, I can tell you I've had a few clients who are retired police officers who try and intimidate you. And I go, but you're not a police officer anymore. But they try to intimidate you, or they try to intimidate other people.
As if they are.
As if they are, and they're not anymore because they got their way over stuff. And when people don't respond to them in their way they're expecting it, they get angry and they get upset. And then they try to, run you over. And that's a power thing that's, they haven't dealt with it. Now, is there some PTSD there? Could be. Is that dealt with? Is that
how they deal with it might not be healthy. I mean, hence why they still have the power trip issue.
Yeah, but they need to deal with that.
Right, but I mean, that's up to them to deal with it.
Oh,
The
no question.
thing about it is that, Steve, it goes back to one of our old podcasts where I have said that at the end of the day, as much as it does inherently suck, to quote myself exactly, that taking care of yourself mentally still falls on you individually. But that's the problem when dealing with something so traumatic is a lot of people, when it comes to PTSD and having that power revoked, a lot of people have no idea how to cope with that, and no one really should. No one is born with the equipment or the knowledge of how to deal with the ability to, one, take a life, and then two, the ability to be told to not do it anymore. How does one even begin to deal with that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So no one is retrofitted with the tools or the knowledge to know how to deal with these things.
Well, I'm going to throw a wrench here.
All right.
If your upbringing was good moral fiber of what you should or should not do, because you gauge all your actions against a certain moral code. Let's you keep it simple. Let's say the 10 Commandments. You know, when it says do not kill. Well, you killed, you go against your commandment. Can you live with that? Well, God forgive you, all that other kind of stuff. But you have the way and the method to do it. The question is, do you want to do it? That's the problem. It's and the power, you know, you think you're in your higher power, if you will. Think you're, but there you do have some tools. If you really don't understand, or it gives you an anxiety feeling that you can't deal with, that's what you go for counseling. That's what counseling's about. But you can there's always something you can do about it.
But wouldn't you say, though, that you're basing it purely off what you yourself would do? Now, the reason I say that is because as someone where you had said that you have not dealt with those things until you actually are in the position where you have done it and are now dealing with it, you're basing it off what you know you would do or what you think someone should do. But it's a matter of until you do it and have to actually carry that weight, would you still react the same?
It's
You know what I
theory
mean?
versus practicality. Or
Yeah, well, you're
Yes.
making an
Yeah.
assumption that you have to experience something to get through it, or somebody. It's like,
No, I'm talking about this specific instance because that's what we're talking about. The specific, like, dealing with that power of what you can do or could do and then having it revoked. In general, yes, it would be an assumption.
well, you can deal with it if you want to. You don't want to. Why would you want to lose your power? You know, if I'm doing all my sickness, I want to keep my sickness in. I want to deal with it because it's fun for me. I have power. It makes me feel good. That's what, depending on your psychological theories and all that, most people do stuff to feel good. You know,
Well, of course they
straightforward.
do. People are going to do what they want to do
Right.
regardless. I said that too. But wouldn't you
Right.
say, though, that the ability to do those things, so for most people that love the ability to do those things, a power
Right.
such as that, typically speaking, it isn't always in your hands to be able to make that call.
My hands, or you?
No. So in general, so when you're contracted or you're in the military to take life, you're not always going to be in a position to do so, no matter whether you like it or not. Eventually, I would like to think, eventually they'll give you the boot. At some point, whether it's age, time for you to retire, they don't see you as a viable asset anymore.
Right,
Eventually, you will lose the ability to do that.
Right,
And I
right.
agree that some people, I still stand by people will need to deal with it on their own. But I still feel as if that to say that someone should or won't almost demeans what they're dealing with. Do you know what I mean? It almost demeans it to a point of right. And what I mean by that is just that you think if that person did this for years and dealt with all these hardships, and you're just and then you tell them just go deal with it or just go get better. It's like I dealt with this for years. I took life. I saw hell. Why are you telling me to just go get help? Like I'm trying to do that actively, yes, but to just say go get help or just deal with it, in my opinion, it kind of demeans what they had dealt with.
Right. They'd have to come to you. You're right. You can't tell them because they're going to blow you off. Yeah. They have to be motivated to change. If they're not motivated to change, then
Agreed.
nothing's going to happen.
Agreed.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't tell them anything. That's with anybody. Anybody who wants help, they have to be motivated to come to you. Whether that's their motivation or the probation officer, or parole officer telling them to do it, or the judge. But somebody, you know, they have to be motivated. Now, whether it's self-motivation, that would be wonderful, but I don't get your hopes up all the time.
I don't either,
usually-
because
yeah,
unfortunately
it's-
the one thing that makes humanity great, the uniqueness of being individuals, is also the greatest drawback. The great quote of our greatest strength is our greatest weakness, and yada, yada, yada. That's unfortunately the drawback to a situation like that. Because one thing that I've noticed about this entire podcast, and as great as it has been, like this has been an amazing podcast, guys, whether you know it or not, is that it all goes back to humanity being flawed. That's the greatest broad term you could put it as, that we are flawed beings on the whole. So that's why a lot of this is funny to me. Not what we would talk about, that taking life or being depressed or having PTSD is funny, but that it's such a simple concept that we're flawed, so these things happen, but it's still terrible to think about or deal with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's so funny as it is ironic.
Yeah,
I mean,
there you go.
yeah.
There's some on the board there says
What?
being weak. You don't want anybody to be weak.
No.
No, why would you?
Why would you want someone to go back to being weak?
Why?
When he's
they're in a
asking
position
why
of power?
would someone, not why.
Yeah.
So realistically, no one would. But the thing is, a lot of the time, what makes them feel powerful, they aren't always in control of having. So again, the ability to take life in military or in service, usually the only reason they're able to do it is because they're contracted out and got an okay stamp from the government and a paycheck that says you're able to do this. But eventually, as I said, that right will be taken away from you.
Right.
So it doesn't matter what makes you feel powerful, is that sometimes it's not always in your hands to have. But some people can't deal with that because they feel that they've been doing it long enough that eventually it's their right to do it because that's all they know.
Well, how bent out of shape are they?
Right, but think about it. If you spend 20, 30 years taking life, what most people, I mean, serial killers, for example, like eventually. Go ahead.
You keep equating this to the military, and the military, they are very strict about who you point the gun at.
Oh, trust me, I know.
When civilians are coming by, and it's a war zone, they are very particular, and those were all the war crimes that happened. So it's very controlled. It's just when you go over the edge, you are over the edge. Now, if somebody here on here, I can't see it because I'm blind. To go back to being weak, it's not weak. It's you're in control. That's what you have to be. When you get out of control in the military, they get rid of you.
Oh, yeah. So I don't mean to necessarily equate to the military. It's just the easiest example, realistically.
Yeah, sure.
But
sure.
So the follow-up question being, but what happens when you don't want to acknowledge your own weakness? What happens when they don't want to but are forced to? At that point, it's ignorance of yourself.
Right. They stay sick.
Right.
It's called sick.
Right, and that's my point. It's just that when I say it still eventually becomes your own problem, at that point, you're just being ignorant of your own issues. I jest and joke a lot about how I cope with my own problems. I joke because, ironically, that's how I deal with my issues. But I still acknowledge them and actively do seek help. I just don't broadcast it because that's no one else's business but my own. So that's what I'm saying. It's just that inherently it is still up to the individual to get help, but you also cannot demean what they're dealing with either. So there's a fine line between trying to help them but demeaning the issue.
Well, you wouldn't be able to demean them if they wouldn't talk to you.
Agreed.
Unless you seek them out purposely to tell them how crazy they are.
Well, some people do that, unfortunately.
Yeah. And they're just as crazy. I don't tell somebody who owns a gun how crazy you are. To me, that wouldn't make sense.
Can I interject real quick?
Yes, of course.
I kind of want to drop off this topic because we've been on it for a little bit, but
a little bit.
Yeah, we've been on it for almost 2 hours. Actually, it's been.
Well, I'm talking about the power tripping and the sickness, and I wanted to bring up a point that you said, Matt. I'm coming back to our main topic of the generational thing. Or as a generational thing, you said you use almost dark humor to cope with issues that you may or may not have. I've seen a lot as a generational thing. It's much more prominent of like you can go on Facebook or on Twitter or something like that, and you can look for hashtag I wanna die, and you see a lot more people. It's more prominent that people are using like fatalistic humor, saying that they would like rather get hit by a bus than do their homework. I mean, obviously, you know which is what you're actually going to do is do your homework. But
and I would definitely say that's true. And this is definitely something for the younger people in here. And Darcy and Flo, you can definitely chime in.
Well, yeah.
Is that for me personally, as an avid social media user, because I, my channel, everything else, I stay very connected to try and push my brand, quote unquote, as much as I can. So being as much as I am on it, and I will admit that, I see it commonly. I even remember talking about it or tweeting it out, being why is it so common that on my timeline every day I see people just saying, man, I really just wish I was dead, or I would rather be dead than deal with today, or it'd be really nice if someone just came over and stabbed me or shot me, or, all these different kind of things. And this is daily reoccurrences, hourly even, between numerous people. And I made a point that either A, it's because we're so connected that seeing these thoughts is much easier, and this has always been a thing, or B, every generation has thought this, we're just the first to really be able to vocalize it to this extent. What do you guys think?
Yes.
Right,
Yes.
for me,
Yeah,
okay, so personally, when someone posts something like "I want to die" or something bad, I would actually like message them personally and be like, "Hey, are you okay? Are you actually joking, or is there something wrong?" Because like I work with like kids sometimes, and then I talk to like younger, like little kids, like 5, 6, 7 year old, and I do see teens a lot too. Like the early teens are like 10, 11, 12, 13, and like sometimes some of them are actually like saying that they actually feel like that. So I mean, I don't know, but.
Any cry for help needs to be investigated. Dealt with.
Right.
I know there are some agencies in our area that do monitor those for that. So especially on social media, that's definitely last few years, the last generation, because of the communication. We never had that issue.
And a lot of the people who post that and they tell me stuff, it's always go back in social media. A lot of them are saying they're insecure because they don't look a certain way or like they don't feel like they're fit in. And like I say stuff like just be yourself and find something you love to do, and then they're just like, you're just lying to me. That's not true. And I'm like, what the heck? I'm trying to help you, but okay.
Here's something that I actually want everyone to do here. I'm going to bring up my first example, and then I want everyone to give their own if they want to. So. Sure. Jealousy and comparing yourself on social media to others is very, very common. So for me personally, people I compare myself to are bigger military YouTubers and bigger streamers, right? So being that I run a military channel that is relatively successful, but I want to be in a position of people who do more than me, but I feel don't deserve it, and bigger streamers who I feel don't deserve what they have purely because they don't put the work in that I do, or men who are just better looking than me, drive a nicer car, things like that. The things that you commonly desire or seek out amongst your own. So, for example, those are my things that I wish I had more of for comparison's sake. What about you guys?
Darcy, you can go.
Oh, sure. Well, I used to like think about that too, where I'm like, oh, I wish I looked like this model, or like I wish I had this handbag. But then because I'm in an organization called Tuni Tante, and then it's a Vietnamese like Eucharist like Catholic organization, and we talk about a problem. And once I found something that I like, example, like I'm good at art and I draw, so it's just focusing on what you like, and then you just don't care about other people and their opinion, and you stop comparing yourself. Once you talk to other people, and then you find something that you're really truly passionate about and you have an end goal, you're just too busy focusing on what you want to do. And I honestly, sometimes I don't even go on my phone that much, so I don't really care about other people or what they might think of me.
What I was gonna say is like everybody at some point or another, I mean, I think we can all that everybody wants to be like the next big thing in some case, shape, or form.
Right. And there's so many young people who are trying to do YouTube or Instagram model for that.
I'm talking about more or less this generation rather than like my dad's generation where like, I mean...
Call me old. Go ahead.
No. Well, all right, I'll call you old. At your age, you've been living longer and I'm not going to say like you've surpassed it, but...
Oh, wait, my prime.
You're prime. You get to this point where you think this is as good as it's going to get and it's all downhill from here. For some people, that's high school. For some people, that's college. For some people, they never truly reach their prime, and that's more about their mindset. I mean, with that, it's more or less like it really doesn't matter because in our generation, because there's so much connection and so much information, the way our brain will process things is that we draw comparisons from ourselves because we know ourselves best and we know what we see best, or so we think. And so when you have these YouTubers that have these perfect lives, they have all the cars, they get all the women, they have so much money, they're absolutely perfect, and you try to compare yourself to them, you're forced to, you should really take a step back and look and be like, well, they have all this, but what do I have in comparison? Like, look at like the problems they don't show rather than everything that they do show. So,
well, I mean, it does go back to the idea of being grateful. So I didn't want to say that I thought those things and I wasn't grateful for what I have. I am very grateful for that. My point is just that those comparisons inevitably do happen, But
Right.
the thing is to
That's
keep in
just how
mind
it
is
is.
just that not everyone, unfortunately, is capable of taking that objective step back, or at least not to the extent to where they can make that comparison or that distinction.
Okay, I don't think we took you swimming. I was
What?
just trying to think. We went. I don't know if we were. I was taking Stephen swim lesson back when he was young. When we went to the middle school, and one of the posters in the middle school in the locker room was. It said there will be a point in your life when the only thing that's important to you is your health. Well, I'm there now. The only thing that matters is how healthy you are. You have good digestion, and you wake up in the morning. As silly as that might sound, when you're
Young spry individual.
individual, it's fine. That's a big deal, and I think I know when I talk with baby boomers versus millennials, baby boomers talk about who's your doctor, what appointments you got. I never have that discussion with millennials. So if you're looking at differences, I never really have health issues discussions with millennials. And now the thing about comparison is like health is everything for me. Without that, I can't do anything. Do I like more money? Sure. But you do the best you can with what you got and life goes on. And I'm always number one because I don't want to compare to anybody. So I will always be number one, and I will always be perfect.
I mean, it's hard to really disagree with that because I think at the end of the day, everyone should try and keep that realization that it's your life and it's the only one you have unless you believe in reincarnation, but that's a different topic. We're not going to get into that. Point being is that this life is the only one you have uniquely to its own. So take it for what it is. But I would say that for me personally, just when you become envious of those things, it can, for some people, again, who cannot make those distinctions, it becomes damaging. Or I guess more so than it should. I don't know. Sorry, go ahead.
Cool. No, you're violating a moral. For example, if you feel guilty about it, you should, because that's one of the 10th commandment. When you're looking for guilt, you always go to the Catholics, and they'll always give you some guilt against. You're always violating one of the commandments, and that's one of it, covering your neighbor's goods. So every time you worry about the cars and all this, yeah, you're in violation of something. So you should feel bad.
Well, I mean that kind of only goes off of whether or not you fall in line with that religion. But even still, I get your point. But I get your point even still. But yeah, no, I agree. I didn't say that I constantly do think of those things. I mean, don't get me wrong. I do become envious purely from the work perspective of I don't understand how people who put so little in get so much back. I'm envious of the fact of I personally think they put in so little, they shouldn't get so much. But that's a different point.
You haven't seen any music videos lately. The people who win these awards, what they do and how much money they make. Talk about a sin.
Yeah. Trust me,
I know. Talk about making money for people who can't sing and all the money they make. Sorry, that's a very big prejudice of mine.
True. I mean, there's some people like Matt said, like or people who don't put a lot in, they get a lot out. Like it's unfair, but that is how society kind of works, actually.
I mean, it's more or less a matter of being envious, but angry of the fact of not understanding that from the beginning of life, or from most time as a kid, you're told if you work hard, good things will happen. Generically, that's a very generic blanket statement. That's not always true, but you're told to work hard and good things will happen. Then you see people who literally don't do anything or do so little but get so much. And it's frustrating because you hopefully actively do try, put in, work hard for what you want, and you see people who don't put in what you think, a quarter of your effort, but they get more than you. Right? So again, you shouldn't be envious of that, but it's hard to not be when on the surface level it looks as if they're not putting in nearly as much as you. Again, you can't say for sure if they are or not, because unless you know them, you don't know what goes on behind the scenes, so it's not fair to say that. But again, it's hard to not be frustrated.
Yeah, that's true. I mean,
just makes you work harder.
Right.
Oh, this is true.
Yeah.
There's a comment on there that says, I don't know if I'm some sort of lunatic, but I don't feel jealousy towards others or envy. And
Liar.
honestly, I kind of feel the same. I used to be very jealous of others, but I've kind of just gotten over it. Like, if you don't like me, then oh well. If you don't like how, don't look at me.
It just kind of comes. I think it just kind of comes with time and with age, where you eventually almost grow out of it per se. You've got other more important things to focus on than what people think of you, what people want to tell you, what people want to like.
A lot to do with age, like.
Right. Well, I mean, it's not even age. It's more like it's just maturity. I mean, granted that comes with age, but some people are forced to mature faster.
Hi.
Yeah.
I'm 20 and I'm
traumatized.
Yes.
Put it lightly.
It goes back to upbringing. So, at least for me, I'm not going to get personal in that sense. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it all goes back to how you were raised, and I believe your upbringing directly reflects the kind of person you will be for a majority of your adult life. It takes a long time to break a mold over how you were raised, at least in my opinion, because I've seen people where, from my sense, for example, in the military, being younger, when I first joined and when I got out of basic training and I was able to live my life on my own, it took me a while to realize that I don't have to okay everything with my family, or I can do things as I please. I know that sounds incredibly stupid, but this is real here. It was mind-blowing to me that I could literally do anything that I wanted and I didn't have to run it by anybody. It was genuinely amazing at the time. So,
and on the other end of the spectrum, I'm sorry, like, I had to grow up by 10. Like, my dad died when I was 6, and I had to, like, go through and just turn into the adult of the house because my mom ended up in the hospital. So, I mean, like, I've always kind of just been doing my own thing. So, I definitely think it is a huge part of how you're raised and, like, the circumstances that you're brought up in. 100%.
Agreed. And I think that's what it comes back to when it comes to the generational thing. The ironic thing that I've always found out about being compared to our immediate predecessor generation is they don't like us, but it's also the generation, well, on paper, or they say they don't like us for some people, not everyone, but for the ones that have said they don't like us, it's also the generation that raised us.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think that's always been my main issue when it comes to the generational difference is you hate what you made almost. Now, I can't say you did this because I'm blaming it on one adult or one parent, but it makes no sense to me that the generation that raised the millennials are also the ones for crapping on them, but it makes no sense because your parenting is what made that generation. Now, to be fair to the parents, the technological advancements and everything else that we have mentioned before have had a great deal of impact and made a lot of hardships on effective parenting. I give that 100%. It's tough. But it still doesn't excuse all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
I just want to say something real quick on that topic. The idea that, like, being raised by baby boomers and obviously being raised by people that are older than you, like, with time, values are different, technology changes, and nobody can be truly up to date with everything all the time forever. Like, at one point or another, you're not going to have the newest this. You're not going to know exactly about what's going on in this industry or that industry or this job or that job. It's just not possible. And I think while as millennials, I mean, generalizing here, as millennials, they do, like, there are a lot of we get a lot of crap from the generations that came before us, but we also give a lot of it back simply because we, for the most part, in my opinion anyways, we understand the world that we're living in more than they do, because our world, how we grew up and how we were raised with technology advancing so quickly in the point of like 5-10 years, we understand it best because we did in fact grow up with it, whereas they didn't. So they can only draw comparisons to what they know best versus what we know best. So while we give it back to them, we don't necessarily, or rather, while they give it to us, we don't necessarily need to give it back to them because it's a difference in perspectives. I mean, completely different perspectives.
Well, I mean, so to be fair here, we do. I'm not trying to absolve our generation of anything because it'd be wrong of me to say that we're completely innocent and we don't give it back. We absolutely do give it back. Right. I cannot say we're innocent angels. That's completely wrong. But one thing to keep in mind, well, not one thing to keep in mind, but you've already stated it, is just that it's hard to really say that they don't understand or they do. They didn't grow up with it, and we didn't grow up in their time. So, but the difference in current social standings and what we value as a generation is kids now value likes and internet. I hate this word so much, quote unquote, clout more sometimes than an education. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it all goes back to what a kid back in the day value his popularity more than an education. Back in the day, that probably didn't seem feasible because that education or that popularity didn't pay for anything. But you can literally have a full job being a social media influencer, which I personally think is completely stupid, but that's my opinion for a different time.
I mean, I wish I could do that, be paid to post photos and
You're
crap
called a
all that.
lobbyist when you're not online.
Basically, yeah.
Call a lobbyist in Washington. You make big money.
Right, so that's what I'm saying. It's just that what a millennial could potentially, or a Gen Z could potentially make money on now, back in the baby boomer era, probably seemed completely absurd. Basically, a social media influencer is someone who's paid to exist and say words.
Right.
So basically, a politician, but without the influence of that. So
And half of them don't even have a good message. Like they're
No.
just like, oh, this is my life.
yeah,
And
I would
someone
totally agree with you. And it goes back to the idea of being compared to. A social media influencer is someone who literally, I hate this word too, flexes day in and day out their lives and tries to influence other people to get what they have. It goes back to the idea of, it's great you can make money like that, but it's damaging at the same time. But that's my opinion.
Wait a minute, isn't that called advertising?
It's
Essentially,
marketing,
yeah.
Essentially, it's marketing.
True, those influencers, they get
It's called-
paid by
But the difference is that what they're influencing is a lifestyle. They influence.
Yes.
They're trying to portray a lifestyle of great success and look how much I have, and you try to make them jealous enough to keep
buy their product.
to buy their product.
But it's like an old style
Guilty or
infomercial.
whatever.
Yeah.
It's like an old style infomercial. Remember those commercials years ago of the guy with the Porsche in the background, the Ferrari with the two naked women in the bikini suit saying, "You want my life? You want all this? You want my mansion? You want these women? All this nonsense? Then go buy this and go do this." It's like that,
Go
but for
drink
this
7
generation.
Crown.
Yeah, right.
Go drink Crown
Yeah,
Royal.
it's just advertising.
Yeah, essentially that's what it is for this generation.
Yeah.
But the problem with it is, it's just, I don't think our generation was brought up with the know-how to handle it because the previous generation wasn't there for it. So you have basically this generation defining the aspects of how it handles, and in my opinion, no one was really ready for it.
I mean, we're learning it while we're doing it. I mean, it's like learning on the job, but
A lifestyle. It's learning on the
Yeah.
job with life, which at some point it becomes hard because a lot of people cannot disconnect now that from with the internet from reality or value from that.
Can I pull around a little bit back to the topic a tad tiny bit?
go for it.
So, I mean, a big part of that is also there's a lot of older people telling us that we're so stupid because we don't know how to do basic things like balance a checkbook or, do this, do that.
Change a tire, change a bill,
Yeah.
apply for a mortgage, stuff like that.
And another thing is we're not being taught that by anyone.
Right.
No
it's
one's teaching that. My parents didn't teach me that. My school definitely didn't teach me that. Want to know what they taught me? Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell.
That age-old classic truthful meme.
I can-
A squared plus B squared equals C
I
squared.
can solve all those couple sentences.
Yeah. Internet.
Google it.
No, AAA for all the car stuff.
Okay.
And what was the other one that you didn't know how to do?
How to change an oil.
Checkbook.
No, balance a checkbook. It's called on a computer, Excel.
Yeah. But
Or
how do
the
you
bank
know?
will do it for you even.
Okay.
Right, but the assumption that you would think that everyone should either A, be the classic millennial and just learn it and go do it, but realistically, at the same time, you cannot judge someone on information you know they wouldn't have. It reminds me of this post that I saw of a mother making fun of her kid because she didn't know how to pump gas, and she was 14 or 15 years old. And she admits that I never taught it to her, and she's making fun of her for not knowing. You just said you never told her or taught
How to
her.
do that.
How is she supposed to know? So you're embarrassing her publicly for information that she's obviously not going to have. How does that make any sense? Was she supposed to YouTube how to pump gas before mom dropped it on her to go pump the gas?
Yeah.
Right, and not even that, but if you YouTube that, the YouTube video is probably going to say, well, since you're an idiot, here's how you do this.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's I guess my counter to that is just that you're right that the information is easy to obtain, but at the same time, you cannot judge someone or make fun of them for the information purely because that is something that should be taught.
Right, you have to be taught it.
Yeah,
you have to be taught. You can't just assume that everyone will go learn it on their own. Because at that point, then why should we instruct people? Well, I mean, since it's the age of the internet, like that means that I shouldn't be on the job training right now. I can go Google it. Now, realistically, I can't for obvious reasons, but that's kind of what dismissing it like that is. That you should never have to teach anyone anything because the tools exist to just go learn it on your own. Yes, it's never been easier to learn, but there's something to be said about actually being taught and trained by an actual person rather than just a YouTube video.
My one professor actually was belittling us because there were things that we didn't know how to do. And I actually countered him in class. How about instead of belittling us, you educate us on it?
Mm-hmm.
Don't treat us like crap because there's stuff that people have failed to teach us. And he had no comeback for it.
Well,
he was just like, well, why don't you know it? And it's like,
why do you assume I should?
No one's ever
right.
Yeah, no one's ever told me that, hey, this is what you should know, this is how you should do it, blah blah blah. If that was the case, then I would do it. And since it's being brought up and I don't know how to do it, it's probably not on fault of myself, though it can be, obviously, but for other reasons. Like, there's something else out there that's making it so a large group of people aren't able to be informed on certain things.
Well, a couple things. One is everybody gets taught certain things. Like, for example, you get taught how to hold a spoon. I remember taking Steven in the high chair and showing him how to use a fork because he gets tired of throwing it on the floor with his hands. So it's good that he used a fork, a knife, and knows how to use them. So you're right. He had to be taught that. I didn't expect him innately to just do it. There are some things innately, and things that as a parent, as a older person, so to speak, when you're a parent, you want to teach your kids, like toilet training is very important. Very, very important. The other thing for me was teaching Stephen how to drive. That's a very important skill to learn.
You didn't do a very good job of that. I'm kidding.
So we even sent him to school for that. And it was Stephen's driving school. It was funny. It was Stephen's driving school. The other thing was there are certain jobs when you come in, you're expected to know a certain amount of things. Example, if you're a nurse, you should be expected to know how to give a shot. I shouldn't have to teach you. I shouldn't have to explain that to you. There are certain things, especially by your license or your degree or whatever, that you are responsible and you should know how to do this.
But
as an employer, I make that's what?
That's not exactly what I was getting at. I was more so talking about, like,
scholastically.
Even Steven's mom brought up earlier this week.
And all my parents.
How we're all why should we be given awards for adulting? And it's like, well, people haven't really particularly taught us how to adult. So since
it's also a joke that
it's adulting.
Adulting is like doing normal adult tasks like changing toilet paper or filing your taxes or something like that.
The boring stuff no adult actually wants to do.
The stuff that no adult wants to do that we haven't necessarily inherently like.
I mean, I think changing the toilet paper.
I mean, like that's a.
Yeah. That one you're on your own.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna say if you haven't figured that one out yet, then I think Steve might have to go home for some remedial kid time.
Oh no! I just throw everything all over the floor and just leave it at next college.
I've seen your room and your basement. That is accurate. That is very accurate.
Yeah. No. That's. I feel like some people didn't get that lesson mean, at least at my college, but that's besides the point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean,
I,
to be fair, I agree with both of you. When it comes to being on the job, if you're a nurse and don't know how to give a shot, then I don't know how you graduated school. But when it comes to generic life things, such as, for example, if you're 16 years old and your parents for some reason bought you a car, I mean a cheap car, hopefully, and then it comes time to do maintenance on it, and then they say, "Hey, Mom, the oil light's on. I need help changing the oil." And Dad looks at you and goes, "Why don't you know how to change the oil?" I mean, it's my first car that you bought. I've never owned one before. Why would you assume I should know how to just change the oil? Well, you should YouTube it. Why would you assume I would do that instead of teaching me like a parent?
Yeah.
Do you know
Or
what I mean?
give you a AAA card.
But my point is this: the ability to just say you can
Right.
go learn it, go do it, is not a defense for you should have just taught them.
Right.
So that I think that's what Flo was trying to say. It's just that the ability to learn doesn't excuse not teaching.
Yeah, that's more along the lines of what I was trying to get at. Not the, like, yay, I changed the toilet paper roll,
Yeah,
give me
yeah.
an award. No, that's not where I was going with that.
I mean, the idea of the participation trophy, I mean, innately does even upset me, even as a millennial. I truly believe
Yeah,
that you
same.
should only get things that you win and work for. But that's
you truly earn and work for, instead of having 12th place trophies for everything that for every sport activity. Like, you go to a bake sale and you got to choose the best cookies, and everybody gets a ribbon. It really defeats the purpose of it as a whole.
Is that a millennial thing?
That's
I feel
a
like
that's
it's a
a
Gen Z
apparently,
thing.
or more,
It's-
I think
it's
it's more of a
becoming-
Gen Z.
It's more of a Gen
Gen
Z
Z,
thing.
okay.
I mean, seeing as millennials are actually like 30, older than 30, like,
But did you get that trophies?
yeah, I didn't like them.
I never got participation
I got
I never did.
I got 2 participation trophies sitting in my room for playing t-ball when I could barely stand at the plate.
Well,
But-
you're a kid. You
Yeah.
want the remembrance
Right. Like,
of it.
but I mean, like, there's like people that are like you're on varsity basketball and everybody gets a trophy at the end, even though you might have sat the bench the entire time. To me, it's like you don't need it. Like, you didn't do any work for it. You don't get the reward that comes
Well,
with it.
as a kid, I can kind of understand it because you were part of the team. But as an adult, it serves no purpose. Because
Yeah,
all
once
that proves
you're- I
to you
feel
is
once
that you
you're
can
over,
be...
like, 12.
To over 10.
Right, so my point is, as a kid, it makes more sense, so not everyone feels left out. But as an adult, as a young adult competing in the real world, being rewarded for mediocrity only proves that you can do little and still get something out of it, which is
Right,
not
yeah.
how the real world operates. If you're mediocre, you get nothing.
Right.
That's how it should work anyway.
I mean, I'll even go on a limb and say participation trophies as a whole really aren't that needed, because at a young age, if you give them participation trophies, that teaches mediocrity is okay. If you don't give them the participation trophy, you give first, second, and third out of a team of 35 people, then that makes the kid want to work harder to get that trophy
Yeah.
and earn it for himself, and that teaches a better work ethic overall, instead of, well, you signed up for the team, you showed up for a couple games, you had some juice boxes, and here's a trophy for it. I mean, whether you play or not doesn't really matter. You get a trophy at the end of it anyways. I would rather if I were a parent, which obviously I'm not, I would rather have my kid have like the first, second, and third place trophy instead of the participation trophy for doing absolutely jack squat.
I mean, like, I'm the youngest out of all of us, and I never once got
Right,
a
right.
participation trophy.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
I guess
yeah.
I can say I didn't, but that's because, and this is kind of tooting my own horn here, but every trophy I had, I was on the team and actively did things to earn it. So I guess I
Yeah.
can't. But then again, there were kids on my team who literally never were part of the starting team at all and got trophies too. So I can get your point. I guess I was just part of the people
Yeah.
who actually did something to earn it.
Yeah.
Did something
You're part of the
to
cool
earn it.
kids. Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nizma.
I have.
Yeah. My dad got something to say.
Yeah, I think this might be a old, a baby boomer thing. When you take a test, what's your passing grade?
65.
65?
65.
65.
typically.
If you went on the job and you did 65% of what you're supposed to do, what would happen?
You
Probably get fired over time, yeah.
Right.
Overtime, yeah.
So why do we accept 65% all the time?
Because I think when it comes to testing knowledge
Because
on
it's
paper
learning, not-
and actually performing a task, there should be measured in two different ways, which is why a test has this percentage rate and job does not.
Okay, let me give. You work at Burger King, and I said no ketchup, and you put ketchup on. What happens?
You
Well,
take it
if
back
the
and
person who
say,
took your order, do it
make it
correctly."
again.
Right. Essentially. But that's the point is, why don't you get it right the first time and do it all the way you're supposed to do it the first time?
Because it's assuming that someone will be perfect all the time.
Well, you should be if you work at Burger King.
Well, that's
I mean,
Well, most jobs.
in a thing. There's a bit of a disconnect between the person who cooks and makes your burger and the person who takes the order.
yes. And
the disconnect.
may I?
What's the disconnect? It should be, this is what you cook, this is what you serve.
If
Well,
if
100%.
no. Well, I'll fill you.
Non-transferable.
I'll fill you in.
Okay, thanks.
Well, no.
Okay.
You as the customer. No, you as the customer.
I'm the customer, right? Okay.
You give the cashier your order.
Right.
And say, perfect world, they take your order down. No ketchup. It's all set. They hand it off to the cook. The cook makes it with ketchup. Is that the cashier's fault or is that the cook's fault?
It depends.
Why?
Well, if the cashier didn't put it on, then it's the cashier's fault. If
But
the
if the
cashier took it off
Right.
and the cook put it on, then it's the cook's fault.
But as a customer, how are you going to know that?
Who do you blame?
I don't know that.
Exactly.
So who
Right.
do you go to scream at?
The cashier,
Yes.
because he serves it
And
to me.
why is that?
You can't check your customer's food. It's already wrapped up in a bag.
Yeah.
Oh, but I can go to the table.
But
Oh, what?
Okay, all right. Flo
ahead.
wants to speak.
Go ahead. Flo wants to speak. She's jumping on it. Go
She's on
ahead.
the soapbox.
She's pouncing.
Yes.
Yeah, a little bit. So I've worked in food service for
Too long.
7 years. 7 years.
Yikes.
God bless
Yeah.
you. God bless you.
Yeah, that's patience of a saint right there. I did McDonald's
you go.
for a year and I hated it.
I was a waitress for 4 years, and then I worked at McDonald's. And I can tell you, I took the order exactly as the customer put it down. And guess who got screamed at when something was wrong?
You did.
Me.
Right.
And
You're
you know what
from-
I said?
Your face
Did
to
you order it correctly?
Mhm.
If you say I want a quarter pounder with cheese with no cheese,
How are you supposed to know which?
yeah, exactly.
And sometimes it's the customer fault. Like they forgot to
Most
say
of the time it's
something,
the
then they
customer's fault.
say it. But then
In
it's
many
like-
cases, it's usually the customer.
Yes.
That whole the customer is always right thing is a load of crap.
Mhm.
Lie.
The customer is
Right,
always
hang on.
wrong. Mm.
Not true. Customer's not always right.
Right.
And they're not
right.
always wrong
Yeah.
either. It's give and take.
Yeah.
But I
I
think
mean,
um,
in
How
certain
bad you want the business.
in certain
mean-
cases, in certain cases, the customer is always right can be applicable, but in more cases than not, especially in industries like retail or in food service, I'll give you an example. I worked at Best Buy for 2.5 years, and when people come in asking for a new printer or a new computer, they're asking me for my information and my knowledge to get them the right product.
Yeah.
They're not always right because they don't know what they want, and it's my job to get them what they want.
Yeah.
That's my example on why in most cases, unless they come to me with a SKU number or a product name, an exact same, like they already know what they want. Like 97% of the time, the customer is not always right because they don't know what they want.
Yes.
so here.
And not only
I
that,
want to give you. Go ahead.
but I
Right.
also have had, like, working drive-through. I had
Right.
someone come through. Hey, what's that chocolate thing?
Let
Let me get that chocolate thing.
You
I
can't
don't.
even see the drive-through, and you can't even see
gotta
the.
get a camera.
I
Yeah.
can't see what you're looking at. And do you know how many chocolate things McDonald's sells?
Mhm. Yeah.
Quite a few.
There's like,
Yep.
yeah,
A
there's
few.
like 4 or 5.
Yeah.
And if I put the wrong thing down, say they want a chocolate shake instead of a mocha frappe,
Mhm.
I'm the one getting yelled at for it because
They couldn't
I can't
communicate.
read their mind.
They couldn't communicate. Right.
Exactly.
So it's the idea of being the customer or the one with the money that feels as if it absolves them.
They're
of
entitled.
Being they're entitled to act as if they will, and they will do as they please. And I think one thing that as a military member upsets me is just that. So my job also deals with customers just in a different kind of way. So for example, my job when messed up can potentially get somebody killed. And that is a lot of pressure to bear a lot of the time. So, but to say that I never mess up because those stresses are on me would be wrong. I have messed up before. Should I get replaced? Should I get deranked? Should I get stripes pulled? No, I made a mistake. I'm human. The idea that because you're being paid, you should be perfect all the time is completely ludicrous. I was in training for a calendar year before I was able to even touch my job.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So
They
does that
have-
mean I should not be allowed to mess up because I was in training for that long? I
As
should
long as
know
it's not
better.
a big mistake. It's the,
Right. That's what I'm saying.
You're generalizing, but if you do get
Yeah.
somebody killed, that's reason to. Whereas if you sneeze, don't say God bless you, and then someone cries wolf about it, then that's
Right, but
they're
that's
two
my
different
point. It's just
situations.
that worst case scenario, someone gets killed. Normal case scenario, someone gets a little mad, or we have a laugh and we call it good. Or ordinarily, it's the latter, where someone gets a little, we call it good. It's whatever. Mistakes happen.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that. I have met trained task force members who make mistakes. Okay, and those guys are in training, in rigorous training for years, and still mess things up. So
Luckily, working at like McDonald's, it's a very repetitive task. So,
oh, trust me, I did it
mean-
too. I feel you. I did it too.
you know, I can take an order and count my same time, and my drawer was 100% always correct. I've never had a short change drawer. But I mean, when I was first starting out, they didn't train me at all. So I made plenty of mistakes starting out,
Learn the hard way.
taking the orders. And that's more on like my management for not training me than on myself, in my opinion, because you can't just throw someone on a cash register and say, take orders. Do it.
Maybe at McDonald's.
Yeah, but
Everything's pictured.
right, but
No, not everything is pictured.
were you going to say something, Dad?
Oh yeah, I just had a scenario. Maybe you guys can help me out here.
Sure.
Steve will make you the bank manager of the bank.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh boy.
Giving him that much authority. Oh
Running
God.
Flo comes in. Comes in. She wants to deposit $500,000 in the bank.
Yep.
And he says the man over there will take it for you and set you up with an account.
Mhm.
She walks over to him. It's a black gentleman. He comes back to you as the manager and says, I don't want to see him. I want to see somebody else. I want him replaced so I can deposit my money. Do you tell her to go, or you give him somebody else? And
I mean,
and your diversity,
that's a
and your
sticky situation.
you're
mean-
the diversity chairman.
I mean, well, all right, well,
Disclaimer first. I'm not racist.
No,
I would never
right.
do that.
nobody's racist, but
But
like,
anyway.
Okay,
is-
we'll use somebody else.
right? Well, no,
Mary over there comes in.
yeah, no. Let's
Okay.
well, let's just
Go ahead.
let's say
Let's answer it as it is, but try to avoid the racism topic,
Yes.
please and thank you.
if you care, like as you mentioned prior, if you care, how much you care about the business is what you're willing to do to get the business. If you're dropping $500,000 into my bank, I will do whatever you need to do to get that job done because of its monetary value that it brings to my business. But in a perfect world, you should be able to say, no, they can take care of you just fine and have no real ramifications besides losing a sale. But that comes at your moral expenses of like, okay, I'll get you someone different so the business thrives, or you don't break your own moral compass and you might get screamed at for losing a $500,000 sale. It's morals versus numbers at that point.
Yep.
Yeah.
But
And
you're
it's-
the diversity manager.
If I'm the diversity manager, then I should say, no, they can take care of you right away, and they walk out and I lose that sale.
And
but
when-
the amount of times that actually
And
happens,
then the president comes and goes,
yep, exactly. And that
okay.
it again, it's numbers versus morals.
At the end of the
No,
day,
it's
that's
money.
just an
It's
unfavorable.
money.
Numbers,
That's
money.
just an
Money's
unfavorable
numbers.
situation,
Yes.
regardless. It doesn't because no
It
matter
doesn't
what,
matter if you're the diversity manager or the person that's actually.
just the teller. It doesn't.
Yeah.
But there are always situations which challenge your
Well, of course, there's moral compass. Yeah, as
Yeah.
we'll say.
oh,
Yeah.
trust me,
let's
I
use-
did what those do.
who's the guy that got nabbed
No
for
problem,
sexual
isn't
harassment?
it?
The film guy.
What's his name?
You know who I'm talking
Yes,
about.
what the
Harvey Weinstein.
How Weinstein.
Weinstein. Yes,
Weinstein, whatever.
Weinstein, whatever.
How many people compromise their values to get ahead there?
Tons.
Right.
But that comes back to a moral thing. I mean, you will bring things back to the Ten Commandments and a religious background to whatever. Like, whereas
Quran.
Flo
You
and
don't have
myself. No. But somebody will go to religion to justify their actions.
Yep.
Somebody will go to their moral compass to justify their actions. Somebody will go to the monetary gain or loss to justify their actions. It's what you're using to justify your actions that allows you to make that choice in that moment.
Yeah.
Like,
And I mean, and then there's others that 100% always act the same way in the situation. Like, this is the ethical code. This is what we do 100%. Like, my boss back at school, I love that man. He is amazing. And he is 100% ethical in all of his decisions.
Right.
And they, like, different situations, but it's still the same outcome because he's not letting his biases get in the way of what his job is.
And he's probably one in a million, though.
Yeah, and he's the Title IX coordinator as well. I mean, he's genuinely an awesome dude. But yeah,
I think what it goes back to is the fact that no matter how you look at that particular situation is unfavorable no matter how you look at it.
Yeah.
And I was going to make the joke that Hollywood and morals don't really go together, but I guess I wasn't in time for that. But
I mean, that's exactly it. Like,
that's fair.
More people than not are willing to give up their own morals to get ahead in this society that we live in that praises the numbers and praises the
money.
The material success that you have rather than your own moral values. Like, it's like
it's
like
boss versus
it's like
Donald Trump.
Right. I mean, it's not even drastic. It's like are you willing to like
Steve.
Doesn't I know. I'm drawing comparisons in my head and I'm seeing if they're gonna work out before I'm speaking. I apologize. The images that you see on Facebook, would you step on a puppy for $5 billion? And do you know how many people that puppy's brain so they get that money? More people than not.
Well, it's easy to say you would do it and then actually do it. It's one thing to say, it's a whole nother to actually do it.
Right, exactly.
But I get your point.
Given the case, you'd be surprised. Like, you'd be horrified to see how many people because they in their moral head, in their head, their moral compass says, I'm gonna get ahead. I'm gonna go and figure out everything that I need to do and do that with this money at the cost of what?
Here's a good question. I would like everyone to chime in on this. Do you believe that if you really want to get to the point where you have quote-unquote made it in society, and by made it I mean money is not a problem, you live how you want to, and you can do as you please, relatively speaking. Do you believe to gain a status like that, you have to break your moral code at some point?
Oof. Depending on the situation. I mean, like, for me...
That's the point. That's the point.
Yeah, I care about my morals and stuff more, so honestly, I don't care about the money or the status. If I'm not okay with it and I have to live with it later, saying like, oh my god, I couldn't believe I did that, then I wouldn't do it. Because it's going to come back to haunt you later.
I mean, I'll say at some point, at least I'll speak personally for myself.
Please.
Obviously. If it comes to it, if money was no issue, I could do what I want. But I had to give up my morals. I would, in a perfect world, I'd love to say no, but 9 times out of 10, you're going to be tested more often than not by society that, again, they praise these like immoral things like lewd women and money and material possessions, like over morals. Which is why the people that have given up their morals, so to speak, and are now trying to get them back are the ones who are ahead, and they're the ones in charge. Let's look at Mark Zuckerberg. He's been giving away people's information for a decade. And just about less than a month ago, he decided as his company, he's like, we're done trying to take people's data. We're done about data personal collection. We're going to go and move forward with protecting our users instead of exploiting them, because he's in the top 10 for most valuable companies in the world already. I mean, but he's trying to save face after he's quote unquote made it, which is...
And he's been caught too.
He's been caught, he's quote unquote made it, and now he's trying to save face. So and it takes a special type of person to like throw away a moral code for their own fiscal and monetary gain. I mean, that's what it is. Yeah. But if it was me, I'd like to say no, but I really think I'd probably go against my moral values to get what I need, because
I think it's
money is pretty much everything. If you want to go somewhere, if you want to purchase something, if you want to get information, it all involves money, and it literally runs the world. I mean,
Exactly.
like having a good heart doesn't pay the bills.
That's
like,
the sad part.
giving-
though.
Like helping the homeless, yeah, it's a good thing to do, but you're not getting paid to do that. And if you are, you're giving up your moral compass because you're exploiting the homeless for your own monetary gain.
Yeah.
Like you can't win. Either you don't get paid and you lose everything because you're a quote unquote good person, or you get ahead, stay ahead at the cost of others or yourself. And I mean, there's no real way to answer that.
I don't like. I think it would depend upon like what sort of situation I am being faced with. Like, I don't think I could sell someone or sell like, you know, like I couldn't do the human trafficking thing, even if it meant I was making hundreds of thousands of dollars. But I mean, yeah, I don't know. I think it really just depends on. Oh my god, that comment.
Having a good heart pays the bills in the black market. That's fantastic.
Dude.
That was incredibly descriptive.
Yeah.
But what I think, what I'm saying is just that you guys are. Mostly what I'm saying is, do you believe that if you want to obtain that status, you will have to break it? So what I'm saying is, do you think the other part to that question
I'd say
is
you have
this?
to.
But the other part of that
I would
question,
say, yeah.
so the other part of that question is, do you think it's possible to obtain a status such as that and not do it? At least not to the extent where you could not sleep at night. To where maybe you have to do something relatively questionable, but nothing terrible, like you may. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. But
Yes.
Yeah.
The question is, yes, you can do that, and yes, you can be moral, and yes, you can be ethical, and you
That's
can
what
still
I'm
have
trying
a
to
lot
get
of
to.
money, and you can still have a lot of money.
Right.
Yeah.
It's possible, but it's
But what?
9 times out of 10
People
being
are going
ethical
to choose
and
the easy
right.
over
It's
the
not
hard road.
as easy to do everything by the book, to do everything the right way.
But you have all the money you want.
No, but that you have to get there.
You
have
don't
to
have
get
the
there,
money
until
you've done
Well, now
whatever.
you're changing the scenario. The scenario I got was you had it.
Well,
no,
that not-
the original question is just that
The
if
original.
the original question that I said was, if you had all these things, but in order to get there, do you think you would have to break your moral code at some point to attain a life such as that? Would you have to
So you're
break
saying
it
we
at
already
all?
have it, or
No, you have to. Will you do these things to get to that moral standard, or that life standard?
You wouldn't have to.
So you're saying like go
because-
around the situation, like try to figure out a different path to get there.
Right. So the question is general. Like I'm saying, do you think you would have to absolutely break it to get to that standard, or do you think that it's possible to, but maybe not as efficiently as if you did, or that you would have to, but it'd be faster? Like what I'm saying, it's possibly. I guess the answer, to my personal way, is just that it's possible, but breaking your moral compass probably makes it easier.
right? Exactly. That's what we're saying.
And what do we know about you when you break your?
You're willing to do it.
You're lazy.
Yeah.
But that's
You don't want
that's,
to
that's
suffer
the
any
risk.
pain. You want
Right,
things have to
that's the
happen
risk.
to you,
Risk.
and you could get burned.
Yeah. That's something that you have to do.
They just gave that guy what 7 years?
Yeah.
The lawyer, Stone.
Yeah.
What's his name?
Weinstein.
No, the guy from Trump's lawyer.
Yeah.
What's his? I know who you're talking about. I can't think of his name.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got all the money, all that stuff, but
Mhm.
suffered moral compass.
Yep.
And you don't have to do that as a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
Not at all.
Nope.
But he chose to do that.
Because to him it was probably the easy way to do it, which
Yeah.
whether it is or it isn't is relative. But
to the situation.
right, it's relative to the situation. But he could have chosen a better path
But we know he lost. We know he did the wrong thing. How do we know that? He got convicted.
because he got caught.
Well, convicted. Caught's one thing. Caught's a matter of whether or not
Right.
you really did something illegal.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get convicted,
Mhm.
you're caught.
Yeah.
You're
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've been caught. You've
so
been found.
so the answer
blah,
is
blah, blah,
yes. I think you can. I think you can
Mhm.
be ethical all the time.
Mhm.
When there are classes, when I've taken some class on ethics, you can be. It's possible.
I mean,
But-
human service major, yeah.
Yeah.
Like you have to be ethical.
Right.
You don't
Or
be
you don't have a
ethical,
job.
you're
I
done.
mean, yeah. Yeah. So,
100%.
Yep.
So I mean, yes, I think
Mm-hmm.
ethics-wise, you can 100% be ethical. But I also think that a lot of people are going to choose the easy way out, and if it means monetary gain for themselves, so be it.
Mhm.
You know, like that in their mind, so be it. Not like I'm condoning. Don't think that.
Mhm.
So what happens if you start seeing your clients
What do you mean?
as a human health?
Oh, you mean like dating?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't do that. You lose your job.
Right. Yeah, that's a conflict of interest.
It's not just conflict of interest. You're exploiting someone that is vulnerable
Mhm.
and coming to you for help.
And
Right.
you know exactly what their issue is, and you probably know the exact way to exploit it. That's disgusting.
Right. Whether
Yeah.
you do or not is relative, but the fact that you know that and you have that knowledge and you still choose to pursue that action.
Yeah.
So she graduated from high school for your counseling. You go to her counseling graduation? Do you go to her high school graduation?
I would say no.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm asking.
I mean, I would probably say no because again, it's a slight conflict of interest with how you handle the situation. I mean, like yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Well, let me ask. Why would you go?
from a moral standpoint, to show support.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if
Who are
you're
you going for?
the person you were seeing, like the person your client.
Is that true? What do you think? Yes?
I mean,
If you're there
I
with good
think it
intentions,
would-
I mean, not to show face and advertise your own thing, advertise your services. I mean,
I personally don't think you should go.
right.
Because at that point, it's kind of showing the public, hey, she was my client and now she's graduated. I did this. I'm the one who
Mhm.
helped her.
Again, advertising
like,
your service.
I mean,
for fun
it's
and all
just
that,
like
yeah, yeah.
a huge
What would you do, Dad?
knot
Mhm.
of
The correct answer is you don't go.
All right,
yeah.
I figured. Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You figure after you got all this.
No, you get.
I know the answer. Now I know what the right answer is.
Yeah.
Right, but no.
I thought I knew it, but I wasn't 100% sure. But
we're allowed to get more information to get our answers.
Well,
and
it's-
yeah,
we're not being great.
The other
about
one
this.
that she alluded to was, you two guys go to movies and she sees one of her clients at the movies.
Mhm.
You ask her, "Who's that?" What do you say?
you don't respond if they come up to you and start talking.
they
It's
start talking
fine,
to
but
you.
you
Right.
can't.
She says, "How you doing?"
Initiate it.
She says, "How you been? How's it going?"
And then you can respond.
What can you respond?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. And what he says,
Oh,
How do
who's
you know
that?
yeah, who's she?
someone from work.
Yeah, it could be that.
If she tells you that, then what?
Oh, like who? Is this one of your coworkers or is
That's
that
not what he
a
said, and that's not what.
But you're implying,
Yeah.
you're assuming things with that. I
No,
mean,
she said from work.
Mhm.
Is she lying to you?
no.
Yes, she's not from work. Oh, that way. I see what you're saying.
If
Yes.
she's a client, if she's
But
a
you're
client,
making that assumption. Yes, you're making
if
that
she's a
assumption.
client and she says she's not lying, you're not breaking anything. But if you constantly pursue it, then you're gonna get to the point where either she gets in trouble or she just basically tells me to stop asking questions.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what it's gonna come
which
to.
honestly,
Okay.
at that point,
Yeah, I mean-
I'd be like, dude, shut up.
Yeah, like it's just what it gets to.
There's a point of where you're instigating a conversation that doesn't
Right,
need to
exactly. You're
happen.
getting.
you
You're
should-
trying.
Eventually,
Right.
there's professional boundaries. Learn to let it die. See, that's what comes
Right,
with me,
right.
being someone who works in an environment where I literally cannot talk about what I
Mm-hmm.
do. So when people instigate it, it's a matter of, can you just not anymore, or I will literally have to shut you down.
Yeah,
You cannot pursue this anymore. I'm telling you no.
Well,
There's
how
common
do you-
courtesy on the other end to just knock it off.
Right.
How do you say no to them without being unethical and impolite?
no to which party?
His
the
part.
client
He's,
or
no,
the...
he's saying. I don't know. I
Are you
don't know
talking
what
from
he's
military?
referring.
From my
Well, I'm-
perspective, I'm not going to
Yeah.
say certain words to not essentially give away certain things, but I
Mm-hmm.
would just say I cannot speak about this, and I'm sorry, but we cannot discuss it further.
Right. Mhm.
And if they insist why,
Right.
I would just say
Yeah,
because I cannot, and that is all it has to be.
That's
And
it.
if they persist on getting upset, then I have
Just walk
honestly
away.
no issue walking away or just killing it, because at
Yeah.
some point the other person needs to give you the respect of, okay, they don't clearly want to talk about it,
Right.
nor do they have
And if
to.
they don't, then you just get out of the situation.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's a fine line between wanting to know information and having a right to ask, and then just instigating and almost cross-examining somebody for no reason.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we kind of got
A
off
line.
topic there. Yeah.
Tad bit.
Yeah.
A little bit.
I mean, I personally, again, gonna put this out there. The podcast has been going almost live for 3 hours, which is good. I'm happy about that. Maintained strong viewership and a lot of interaction. So before
Yeah.
anyone dips out on me, if you have to leave, that's fine. I appreciate everyone being here, from the viewers right now and everyone that prior, and you guys in general, for making this an exceptional podcast.
Yep. Oh yeah. I mean, I'm not going anywhere just yet. I mean,
I'm almost out of my Diet Coke.
Steve, get your dad another Diet Coke. Be a good boy.
I mean,
Well, it was a 2-liter.
yeah.
Oh
it's
my
2 liters.
god.
That's what I'm saying. It's getting late.
Yeah, it's almost one.
Yeah.
I mean, Dad might be dipping out soon, but I got
I
time.
missed Saturday Night Live.
I'm sorry.
Sacrifice. I sacrificed.
Thank you, Dad.
Well, we very much appreciate you, and the audience
Yeah.
has actually very much enjoyed your contribution.
oh
to the
yeah, I
podcast.
think you're definitely. Yeah.
And I think the funny thing about it is, I imagined this podcast initially as a big, long debate between Flo and your dad, but we've actually agreed on almost every
yeah,
topic,
I mean-
and the minor discussions that we have had have come to a very sound conclusion. It's been
Yeah.
very productive. I've actually very much enjoyed it.
Well, the point is, as again, when we started, it was the values. Values don't change on people, no matter what the generation is. It's your experience that formulates your values, because the idea is really to have a value system given to you by a power greater than yourself, because then you can't challenge them.
Mhm.
When you start using, I would say, human value systems, you get in trouble. But if you use something, and for example, religion is a biggie for a lot of people. They usually give you a set of rules and guidelines to
Yeah.
follow. If you follow that, you'll be in pretty good shape.
Yep. At least in eyes of the religion, maybe not in the eyes
No,
of
in the eyes
society.
of, usually, but in eyes of society and the law, you're not going to really screw up, because most religions, I don't want to say all,
Yeah, I was going to point out that.
say you shouldn't kill people.
Right.
Most of them say you shouldn't be jealous, both honor your
I mean-
parents, worship the Lord.
But like
they all kind of say that somewhere.
the Bible also says don't eat pork and don't
And
have mixed
don't
fabric.
The
eat
Bible
shell
says don't eat
foods.
pork.
The Bible
you-
says that?
Wait, are you sure?
Don't eat shellfish.
Yep.
Well, you better show me that online. there.
Yeah,
But,
I would like a point of reference for that one.
Yeah, hang on.
But I think so. Here's an interesting question, and this is primarily
It
for
must be the Old Testament.
Bible Gateway, Leviticus 11.
this is a question for
Old
Dad.
Testament?
Yeah.
So this is an interesting comparison. Now, maybe I'm absolutely crazy to make this comparison, but remember when I brought up the idea of people comparing themselves on social media to other people? So what about the idea of creating the perfect individual in a Bible or religious testament? So you have your 10 Commandments, or whatever religion you have a set strict of rules to live by, and a lot of them require you to be perfect almost all the time. So you're comparing yourself to that standard, and when you break it, that can damage a person as well. Would you say that living to those standards and deviating from them can actually be harmful to a person if they don't know that sinning or breaking the rules can be okay depending on what it is?
Right.
Would you say that's actually comparable to social media comparing yourself to other people in a similar sense? Because the repercussion is the same.
Right.
No. I don't. They say yes. I don't. It's a set of values that social media changes like the wind. It changes. Your value that you're comparing it against is coming from
It
humans.
alters. Yeah, it alters.
And what do we know about humans? They're not always
Right.
there.
Yep.
But when you have a solid value like the Ten Commandments, or your faith as you understand it,
Yep.
or like again, a power values given to you by a power greater than yourself, that doesn't change, and it's the standard.
Well,
So that doesn't
But,
change.
but it doesn't. But the thing about it is, you're still comparing yourself to other people for a set standard of what you deem to be correct, the same way you would compare yourself to a testament. Just because the standard changes for social media, it doesn't change the fact that you're still comparing yourself to something what you deem to be correct. What it is kind of irrelevant. What the fact of the matter is, you're still comparing yourself to what you believe is correct. And the fact that when you deviate from that standard, whatever it may not be, can still be damaging. What it is not truly, not saying it's relevant, but not really the point. The fact of the matter is that it creates an ideal of, it can paint this idea of what you should be, and when you deviate, it can be harmful.
Well, but if you choose to deviate,
I mean,
it's guilt. It's guilt. That's the only thing. You choose to make yourself feel bad. If you choose to make yourself feel bad because you did something inappropriately, that's your choice. Many people choose not to feel guilty about it. We call them psychopaths.
I would like to not be judged. Thank you.
No, they by definition, and you got Flo here, and resource person can.
No,
they're human. Talk about psychopaths, which is basically they have no feelings. They don't care about you. They sell their mother, and there is no value system there. That's why we put them in jail for a long time. This is a standard that when you feel guilty, and if you're looking for, now I think, for example, baby boomers have that problem because if you went to Catholic, at least in Buffalo, was out there, in Buffalo, it used to be most people, if you were Catholic, you went to a Catholic school with nuns, and you went to church every day.
Mm-hmm.
And these were the nuns with the habits, so they were the penguins, so to speak.
They were old school.
Yeah, old penguin. They looked, and you turn the wrong way, they slap you.
I couldn't imagine
and then if you did
like that.
Oh, but the discipline is unbelievable, because what happens is when I went to a public high school, you don't talk in class. Mm-hmm. You don't have a problem going from point A to point B without talking. You don't go somewhere and hang out. You don't do that because you're raised to stand in line and be quiet, and you don't talk to anybody. Now that's definitely it's like standing in formation, if you will. You can't say squat.
Oh, trust me, I know, I did it.
And if you do, you get smacked.
But would you almost say, though, that that's not necessarily an appropriate way to raise someone for that standard? Or that way of life?
That's a matter of opinion there.
No, I'm asking. I'm not saying that's wrong.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I think it is one way of doing it, because you are shown how to do things. The example I'll give you is some people learn math now with the computers. Let's talk about a generational gap. Like, I've seen my niece teaches, second grade, I think she teaches?
Yes.
And they have the electronic boards, the computer stuff.
Yeah, Interact board.
Well, I didn't know what that was, and blackboards were very popular in my day. And it would be that you would go to a blackboard and you would stay there till you got the problem right. Now you try one problem, you come back, wrong, next one come. Now talk about embarrassing, and you felt guilt, if you will, because the nun would lay it on. And if the shame, yeah. So the nun will lay it on. Now, is that a good thing after you do that for a few times? Yes. You get called on the carpet for every little thing you do, so you can't get by. So the thing is, you're going to be, it was more.
You're held to a higher standard.
It's a higher standard of how you conduct yourself and how you respect other people. Talk about, if you didn't say good morning, it's like the priest walks in, you better be upstanding. Nie będzie pochwalony Jezus Chrystus, which is a Polish Latin thing. We won't go into that, but you had to get up, stand up, and say that, almost like in the military when say 10 hut, everybody stands up for the officer in charge. You give the salute, and everybody moves on.
Yep.
But that kind of training, when I went to the military, it was just like school, Catholic school.
But
and
at what
people
point,
laugh. Pardon me?
Sorry, but at what point does it become absurd or ridiculous? To a point of, if you've been doing it for so long, where, right. I mean, yeah, you have a standard or structure that's great, but at the same time, at what point does that just become unnecessary?
It doesn't.
When it comes to unnecessary grievous bodily harm to you or another?
When it becomes bodily harm?
If listening to your elder.
Could that happen? Yes. Could that happen? Yes. Where a nun was over the boundary?
Right.
Sometimes, yes. And
Like when my mom got her hand slammed in the doorway because she was 10 seconds late and her friggin' hand got broke by the teacher.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a little absurd.
When
if that would happen, they should be sued.
Right.
Because in my opinion, when you
That was
raise
in the
people
1960s. They weren't being sued.
to be literally robots for years, I mean, I appreciate the fact that you gave people on discipline and structure, but at the same time, when you can never ever take them away from the environment and show them that they can actually be real humans too, you create robots. You create, honestly, just zombies. I understand.
I don't think too many people were robots once they left the nun's site.
Well, right, but
I think they were maniacs.
But that's my point. That's literally what I'm trying to say. It's just that at what point does that structure and discipline start just creating mindless zombies who don't have a thought for themselves? Because once someone is removed from that structure of discipline and whatnot, they're removed from it, they can't function because they only know what they're told, which ironically is what people don't like millennials for. So at what point is it become unnecessary or does it become actually making progress against itself? Yeah, counterproductive.
Well, I can, as a boomer, what it really taught me was when somebody's talking, you don't interrupt. You definitely don't interrupt an adult till they're done talking.
You don't speak until you're spoken to.
Right. You don't speak until you're spoken to unless you wanted something. Then you have to wait till they stop, and then you go ahead and ask what you need to do. Which is, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing to do that all the time.
I think in certain cases, as Matt was starting to get into, it will eventually start to work against itself, where you're going to have, like, why do you think in the early, like, late 80s into the early 90s, there was just a mass influx of graffiti and rebellion and stuff because people didn't want to listen to it and, like Rise Against Authority and, like, Sons of Anarchy and NWA, things like that. Lots of big movements against people in positions of power. Like, because of like the effect that having this almost, I'm not going to say militaristic, but a absolute power above you kind of brought on the idea of like, it's like if you don't conform, you're wrong, and when you're not necessarily wrong, it's just one person's like thoughts and morals versus another's. I mean,
so we're not trying to say that if at any point then we were trying to say that I apologize, but we're not trying to say the morals that you learn from things like that are wrong. I totally agree with you on the respect. And if at any point that I have done that, I apologize. We're not trying to say the morals and the good things you take away from them are bad. We're more or less saying that eventually the only thing you end up creating, like Steve just reiterated, is you just create people who are eventually going to turn on you or become the very problem that you're trying to stop. Yeah. So while I agree that the morals and the structure are great, it does to a certain point you become counterproductive because it's not human to not be flawed and to exist as if you have to be a certain way all the time. That goes against what we literally are. Yeah. So to say that you should be perfect all the time or any mistake gives you discipline or actual harm in some kind of way goes against everything that makes us who we are. It literally, by definition, is counterproductive.
Yeah.
So no, I disagree, and I disagree because you cannot be perfect all the time. By definition, you cannot be perfect.
Right.
That is a realistic thing. If you break it down with the sin routine and all that, you have to know you sin. You still have to want to do it, and then you have to go confess it. But you have to do it. You know it. You know you're not perfect. Everybody knows you're not perfect. You know you're not perfect. I don't know if you really become a robot when you're 8 or 9 years old. I don't know if that's even possible. Do I think you can be a little more quiet maybe or not as... but I don't know about you, but when I see 8, 9-year-olds who run around like maniacs, like in the supermarket and that, I think it's a little lack of discipline there.
I can agree with that.
I agree with that, but the solution shouldn't be total dominance of this at this time, this at that time. You will do this all day, every day. Any time deviation from that results in action. See,
So
there's a
then-
way to give discipline without resulting to literally being told what to do all day, every day, no freedom of will. The solution to someone not behaving doesn't have to be the exact opposite of what you deem to be incorrect.
Okay,
And
let me
such
help you with that
insanely-
one. As children, you are told what to do, when to do it, how to do it, when you will do it or not do it.
I mean, that's
And
kind of the
that's-
point of that's called just being raised and being brought up.
But that's a discipline, and depending who your parents are, whether or not you do it the correct way, that's the issue.
Well, there's
Now-
a matter of opinion on the correct way to parent. Some parents are very hands off. Other ones are like wringing your
And-
neck if you don't wash the floor.
And what do we know about the people who don't have hands off?
Well, this here, can I say
Go ahead.
something?
Sure, jump in,
Yeah, go
please.
for it, Josh.
So, there's 3 types of like parenting according to psychology. There's permissive, authoritarian, and authoritative. With the best one to raise a child or to give discipline is the authoritative one, where they give discipline but they explain why it should be done, so that the child could understand and then they can conform to it. While you get the authoritarian, that's kind of like the dictator parent that won't let the kid do anything and they won't explain anything. And then the permissive one are the one who just let the kid free on. So you have to have a range of like the middle, to have like.
Agreed.
Yes.
It doesn't
Yes.
have to be one or the other, which is why I don't agree with the idea of raising a child only in the disciplinary section.
It's fading in and out. Can't hear.
I mean, and like I feel to an extent, we should like part of it comes on the parent, but part of it also comes on the child. Like I've been like I know people who grew up with the strict parents in the world.
I
And
got
now that
nothing
they're
here,
in
Steve.
college and away from boom, that's it, they're done. Like they go out and they party and they're constantly like it's just insane. And part of that is the parents and part of that is also that person, like that specific person. Because I could have been like, yeah, I'm gonna party every single day and I'm gonna get a 0.01 GPA. But that's not me. That's not what I do. But I easily could have done that. Steve could have done that. Any of us can. But we need like some control over ourselves. It's not just mom and dad saying, don't you do that. You're a bad child. It's also you saying, hey, I'm not going to let this control my life. So, I mean, it's partially on the child, it's partially on the parents, partially on society at the time, what the values are and the morals that are up into that. So I feel it's a lot of nature and nurture for just about any issue. So, yeah.
I agree, because what we were saying took a lot of responsibility away from the person at hand, which we can't really do.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they're also still responsible for themselves, because as we've said before, someone is still always responsible for themselves at the end of the day, but a lot can go into how they act, and sometimes they genuinely just would not know better. So,
Hey, Matt. Can you check your DM?
Hey, Steve, want to know a fun fact?
Hmm.
Mom almost put me in Catholic school.
My parents thought about doing that. Yeah, my parents thought about putting me in Catholic. I think I made it out of the public school system all right.
Yeah.
that's
Money issue.
up to interpretation.
It was a money
Hey,
issue.
hey, calm down there.
But Steve, me, Catholic school.
Yeah, it's weird. I'm actually in like a Catholic organization right now. I wasn't in it. I started like a couple years ago, but I don't know. It just teaches me a lot about the faith, and then just and I just got to know a lot more people, and it gave me more responsibility because I have to volunteer and I do all this stuff now. So
Are you doing stuff with kids?
yes,
Did you have to take the Vieta or the sex abuse thing for kids at the Catholic Church?
oh okay. I didn't take that one yet this year actually. So
Okay.
That'll be one for you. Yeah. I mean,
Enjoy.
there's no denying that. Like,
but we did talk about some of the issue coming up, especially with the Pope and then the
Right,
recent like
right.
sexual
Yeah, that's
abuse
a-
of
that's a
nuns
big
and
one.
stuff. We did talk about that issue.
Yeah, the donations have dropped off quite a bit.
yeah. I mean, there's no denying that. Like, having a group of like, just in general, like to me, if you really look at it from a really, really high up, religion is just a group of like-minded people. Like they all kind of have the same morals they bring together. So
I'll give you a quote.
Sure.
Religion is the opiate of the masses.
Yeah.
I.e. Karl Marx.
Yeah.
I could see that. Yeah.
Oh, Karl Marx? Are you kidding me? Yes, absolutely.
I could see that.
I mean, going off that, I mean, it's really,
ironic.
really.
Yeah.
Oh, it is. It's very ironic. But I mean, it's easy to get along with people and to, like, it's easy to get along with people when you all have a common value or a common thing, like, that you all have together in common, essentially. I mean,
you and me.
right. Like you, there's a reason why you become friends with people, because you have something in common with them that you can both relate to and then enjoy or have fun about or, like, understand from each other. Like, whether it's religion, whether it's video games, whether it's we go to the same, it's this, that, or the other. That's what makes people, like, come together in that organization. I mean, like, it's just a mutual, like, it's a mutual understanding about a topic.
So, guys, I don't want to cut you off, but
Sure.
Darcy has to unfortunately leave us. So
Okay.
I'd like to thank her for being on this podcast, and everyone
Oh
else.
yeah,
for
thank you for
their-
having me. Like it was
Yeah,
great. Like I just
thank you,
love listening to
Darcy.
you guys.
Yeah, good
like,
talking.
Yeah, it
I
was
appreciate
good.
you being
Thank
here.
you.
I hope you had a good time and talking to all of us, and enjoy your volunteer time tomorrow.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
All right.
Bye,
Have a-
guys.
Have a good
Bye.
night.
Bye-bye,
You
Darcy.
too. Thank you. Bye.
But in any case, when it comes to something like that, I always bring it back to this because this is a funny tale of becoming friends. The tale of Steve and I becoming friends is one that's wrapped up in the definition of irony. Steve will be the first one to tell you, and I always think it's funny, and this might come as a shock to your dad if you haven't told him this, is that Steve genuinely hated my guts when he first met me.
Well, Steve didn't like me per se when he first met me.
I mean, I really don't like any of my best friends per se.
And he doesn't like me sometimes.
Yeah, and look, you raised me. Look at how great
Yeah.
you are. Yeah.
But it's funny how sometimes it doesn't always immediately happen. I think that's what I'm trying to get at. Steve and I became very close because once we actually sat down and talked to one another, because he only went off of what he initially saw off how I acted, but didn't talk to me, and same with him. We became friends mostly through Joel because we were both friends with him.
Yeah.
So he was the mediator for us both.
Yeah, and then we kind of like connected more than either of us did with Joel by the end of senior year. But that's, I mean, how that is.
Yeah,
But-
that's history, you know. But it's funny how that works. How it doesn't always have to be an immediate gravitational pull.
Right,
It can literally be a polar opposite. It can be polar attraction. It can be trying to push two opposite magnets together. That's essentially what that was the first time.
Yeah. I mean, like,
Oof.
yeah.
Me and you.
Yeah.
It definitely was not. I was like, oh, and he just seems like a jackass.
Yeah.
Language.
My bad, but
Yeah.
still.
But I mean, like,
Steve,
that's exactly
we struggle.
I just want
But I mean,
Captain
like, that's
America
what I-
on you. Don't make me do that again.
Yeah. But I mean, that's what, like, I thought of Matt at the same time with that. I mean,
Steve's main issue with me is that he thought I was the most cocky person he had ever met in his entire life.
Yep.
And-
You just thought you knew it all.
And to some extent, to give myself a little bit of credit, I did know what I
mean,
was talking about.
yeah.
But how I acted upon it was definitely not favorable. Meaning
Yeah.
that I had knowledge, but I flaunted it in the worst kind of way. But the main thing about me and Steve is the fact that, now granted, I'm not making excuses for myself at all, but my life at that time was not the best, and my attitude was a direct reflection of that. So once Steve was able to see past why I acted the way he did, he understood it that much more as to why I acted the way I did. My attitude was a cover-up literally for how I was dealing with my real-life problems.
Right.
So that's how that situation went. And I think a lot of friendships can happen that way.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's countless friendships, relationships, wars, governments, all being started over mutual hatred of stuff. I mean, like, look at the Revolutionary War. We didn't like Britain, so we left, and that's kind of how that went. Like, mutual hatred brought an entire nation together. Like, but that's literally ancient history. So,
And guess what? That's the T.
Yes,
Oh
it
my-
is.
There are so many historical jokes in that statement. It's amazing.
Oh God.
But come on, it's not. It's funny.
Yeah,
give me
yeah,
that
yeah.
one. You got to give me that one.
I'll give you that one. Yeah. But so let's kind of get back to topic here. We kind of went off on a little tangent
Yes.
there. So
Tiny bit.
yeah. So where were we kind of at with the topic? I kind of forgot.
So what I was mostly making the point on is just that we went from structure and discipline in the home and in schooling to what it produces in the outside world and how people react to a sudden burst of freedom. Remember, I mentioned earlier that when I joined service and when I got to my first base, I could do whatever I wanted and didn't have to run it by literally anybody.
It was mind-blowing to you.
It was actually mind-blowing, the idea of, holy crap, I have money, I can do whatever I want when I'm not working, I can eat whatever I want. And I didn't go totally crazy. I wasn't a partying airman. I wasn't anything like that. But the idea that I could do what I wanted and only one who felt the repercussion of it was me it blew my mind for a while until it just became life.
How about scared?
It wasn't honestly really that scared. Ironically enough, as much as I do love my parents and being home, there's a lot of reasons why I don't necessarily go home all that much. It's mostly just because I lose the privilege of my life here. I go from being an adult, kind of reverting back to being a child again, and I don't like that.
Well, what would you do that your parents wouldn't approve of?
Nothing. It's just a matter of the fact that
You're still their little boy in their eyes,
Yeah.
not a 23-year-old airman.
Yeah. So it's more or less a matter of things that I would do. You know, that they would say that you need to still tell us this, you need to be home by this time, or you can't say this or that. And realistically, having been living on my own for almost 4 years, never really needing their assistance for anything monetary, anything at all, their names are not on anything, I don't owe them money, I don't literally go to them for anything besides talking or personal advice, to the point of I think I should at least be given the respect of a full functioning adult. I don't do anything to disrespect them, but I still feel as if that there should be a mutual understanding that I am an adult and I should be treated like one.
Right.
Aunt Stacy.
And it sounds like you don't get it.
Not too much.
Well,
Right, he just said it.
But this isn't my personal platform, and this isn't my personal soapbox, so we're not going to discuss this in further detail.
Yeah,
this is not the
a
place
different story for another day, another year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is not a place for my personal problems. But regardless, it's an example, right, to put out there.
That's a baby boomer thing with parents. You know, it's like some people are like, just get out, you know. And then the old time, always talk about before family with grandma, family, when they want family to stay together. If you're in town, you should be living together. You shouldn't be out on your own. You know, that is that kind of thing. Why would you get your own separate place and pay your own bills for really cheap and save the money to buy a house, marry a nice girl? But to me, that's definitely a baby boomer thing as opposed to a millennial. It's like millennials now, let's live together before we get married.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, it drives
a lot of people
us baby boomers crazy.
Yeah.
Believe
because it goes against what you were raised on.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I mean, honestly, I'd rather live with someone before I marry them so I know what I'm getting into.
Agreed. But then again, I can see why that's a crazy idea.
Right.
But your moral compass is challenged.
Your moral compass is challenged as a baby boomer. A millennial's moral compass isn't challenged because we view the topic differently.
Yeah.
Right. So it's okay to live together.
Yeah.
In our eyes, yes. In yours, no.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what it is.
And personally, really, truly, I don't want to spend a couple $1,000 on a wedding just to get divorced because I can't handle living with. You know, if that's.
I thought you're in love. If you're.
Yeah.
You make sacrifices.
There's infatuation.
And you do what
there's infatuation, then there's the honeymoon phase, and then there's love.
It's this thing called dating where you get to know your person and you need to talk.
I mean, that's.
I don't think
that's
still
obvious
a thing
for everything.
Yeah, that's still a thing. I mean,
but that's also something interesting to think about, though. Is just that you can date someone for years, but if you dated someone for years, but then only decided that you wanted to live with them before getting married, then you found out that living with them, because if you date someone for years but you go home to different houses, it doesn't work that way because you still, you don't have the experience of being with each other all day, every day. No matter what you do, that person's in your company. So when you finally have that where you're always in the room with each other, there's always the opportunity to bother one another, that's when any crack that would show does show.
Yeah.
And that's when the true experience of what married life could be like, that's the closest simulation you're going to get to actually being married. Because when you're dating but living in separate houses or different homes, eventually it doesn't matter. You separate at some point and you've had your fill of that person.
Right.
All of those pet peeves that the other person has.
Like they don't put the cap on the tooth. They don't
change the toilet paper.
Or they want an award. Yeah.
Or they don't put the toilet seat down.
Yeah, stuff like that.
So people wouldn't want to work with each other when they make the commitment.
Right. Well, I mean, that's the things that
you got to know ahead of time. Now, I'll say, is that a millennial thing?
Right.
Is that a millennial thing?
I would definitely say that is a millennial thing where, I mean, you with the way baby boomers with the way they're raised with a more traditional structural upbringing, they're more or less, I accept you with your flaws kind of thing. Like that's kind of in the marital vows, like in sickness and in health. And even if they're sick all the time and they're just a rotten piece of garbage to you, you accept that and you move on with it because that's what you signed up to do when you took those vows.
But I mean, there's something to be said about learning to accept someone's flaws and then just finding out you're not compatible, because you can't.
But that's where dating comes in,
right?
And then what do you do then?
Because someone's
called divorce,
right? But what I'm saying is just that no matter how much you date or try to use these preventative measures before rushing into a marriage, no one, and I mean no one's going to be perfect in every category, no matter what. It's about compromise. Where are you willing to compromise? And some people just aren't willing to compromise on some things or anything. Marriage is a compromise, I think. I'm not married, so correct me if I'm wrong here, but you will compromise on some things at some point regardless.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the preventative measure isn't to make sure that they're perfect. It's more or less a matter of, if I got married, could I tolerate this?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
can I learn to live with this or that or whatever?
I mean, but also, like...
And that answer is...
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
You choose not to.
Right.
Sorry, just had to.
Well, no, that's fine.
Good.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say real quick. Dating is still a thing, and
absolutely.
Most cases, I mean, like living together, like I have no problem with that whole. You good?
No, I'm good. Just drop my phone.
I heard a thumb, so I thought.
Yeah.
Did you have an?
No, I object.
Okay. But so what I was gonna say is because dating is obviously still a very big part of like getting married and stuff. I mean, yes, there's a big hookup culture in today's society now with like Tinder and Grindr and Bumble and all that crap and Christian Mingle and FarmersOnly.com and all this crap.
Oh, that's the best one. That's my favorite one, man. I have met so many. The amount of yeehaw chicks that I've met, man, they're the yee to my haw, and they're the best girls I've ever met in my entire life.
Isn't that a millennial thing too?
I mean, yeah,
not really.
Dating sites.
No, the internet. That's
not
dating
at all.
sites because of the internet.
Right.
Yes,
well, they're because of the internet. But I've met my dad met my stepmom
are...
on what's eHarmony. My dad met my now stepmom that he married on eHarmony.
But
a lot of old people use it.
Right.
But that's the point. It's a millennial thing. It's a new thing.
Yes, but hookups are not.
It's a new thing, but the ability to use it can be used by anybody. It just came in this generation.
Right.
Where it comes from is kind of irrelevant, at least to me. What matters is the fact of who uses it and why. I mean, if you're looking to hook up, that's what Tinder's for. The other websites are somewhat more respectful to the point of you're actually on this to date. You're not just looking for a one and done.
Okay, Cupid is a little bit more dating end, whereas Tinder is
what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Going back to like what my dad said about how he doesn't think living together before you're married is proper or not. I mean, I'm gonna say on that spectrum, when you date somebody for long enough, no matter what you do, whether you're living with them or not, if you're around them enough, whether it's you go over to their place to watch a movie and cuddle and all that coupley stuff, if you do that enough, you will go and see their flaws and it will kind of present itself before you end up with two twin beds sitting next to each other in a bedroom because you're not doing anything that you shouldn't be doing before marriage.
Uh-huh.
That's another problem too.
Yeah, that we're not getting on that topic.
No,
Yeah.
we're not.
No, but
No.
but like my thought on that is, again, I'll reiterate, if you're dating somebody long enough, you will find out their flaws before you have to move in with them. And that's not, I will say, I think a millennial thing is that people become infatuated and they get stuck in the honeymoon phase and they move way too fast. I know people that they were dating for a month and a half, and they're engaged. They claim to be very happy. They're in college. They don't live in the same dorm room per se, but they claim to be in love and they're going to get married and live happily ever after. I mean, by my standards, I think they're moving way too fast, considering like
dating for a month and
right. I mean,
boom,
like
engaged.
getting out of one relationship, getting into another relationship, like within a month of that, and then a month after that, getting engaged. You don't give yourself time to decompress and cope from. Yeah, you rebound and you just make a poor life choice. I mean, like I've seen people where it works out, good for them, but the majority of people, you're not going to have that.
I mean, it's kind of ironic because I literally just made a YouTube video for my channel because it's military based, saying dating in the military, is it worth it? Getting married before you leave, is it worth it? It's always oriented to the millennial or the Gen Z audience. And it's funny because in the military, marriage is looked at as a utility rather than its intended purpose. So that's why it's kind of funny that you bring it up like that.
Yep.
But
yeah.
There's something I wanted to say, but I lost my train of thought. I won't lie.
Okay.
But go ahead, Flo. I'm sorry.
Oh no. I definitely if I personally don't think that there's really anything wrong with moving in with someone before you get married. As I've already stated, like, it's easier for me to learn more about you if I'm around. Yes, like dating, we're obviously going to talk about things, but I don't know those stupid little things
Quirks
that you do that I would never have guessed in 1,000 years until we got married and boom.
But is it so little that you can't just overlook it because you're in love and you're so happy with that person?
You're not always gonna be so happy with that person.
Yeah. And one of the things that I'm having trouble I think I finally got my point back, is just, why is it ridiculous, the implication of wanting to move in with someone before you marry them? Why is that ridiculous? Because back in the day, of course it was you married and then you dealt with it, but what did that breed? A lot of unhappy marriages and people who are only married because they got married and just don't feel like getting divorced, or they're just married for the sake of being married. I mean, it's like, you either stay married and suffer, or you actually try and test the field out and make sure it's actually worth your time. I don't understand that's a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
Why is testing it out so worse? Why should you have to make a choice, deal with it, and if you're mad, oh well, suffer because divorce is not acceptable? Why should the alternative be misery?
Yeah.
Well, you feel it's a misery. Mm-hmm. That depends on you. Mm-hmm. The goal is, if you make a vow, you have trouble keeping the vow. Is it that you don't want to work on it? Is it that you're lazy? Is it
you're willing to work on it? Not.
I just have another question to just throw out here for the millennial, which I think is maybe a millennial thing. Is everybody know what prenups are?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Would you sign a prenup?
Potentially.
Yeah, that's very situational. My current situation, probably not. But then again, it depends on when I actually get married. So in my current standing, if I were to get married tomorrow, likely no.
Because you have no money.
No, I do. It's just that, I mean, if they want to take what little I have and are willing to get married to take it, then they would have been better just getting a job. There isn't too much to take, is my point.
Yeah.
Right now.
Right now, but if that's what I says. If I got married today or tomorrow, getting married wouldn't get you a whole hell of a lot.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
so then why wouldn't you do it rather than move?
What was the question? You cut out.
Why wouldn't you sign a prenup instead of moving in?
Yeah, sign a prenup, get married, and go from there.
Because at the same time, a prenup is now at the cover of, I don't know if this person's worth my time or not. Sure, my goods are protected, my personal enjoyment of this person is not. A prenup doesn't tell me doesn't protect me from this person annoying the crap out of me on a day-to-day basis. Sure, my money and my personal goods are protected. Not that isn't. The prenup's not saving me from them potentially annoying the crap out of me. It doesn't save me from that, which is what marriage is for. No one should really view marriage as a utility for goods. If they do, then I pity you, but that's not the point. The point is just, sure, a prenup is an option to protect those interests, but not your emotional investment.
Yeah. And if I may, you know, on my mother's side specifically, every single one of the siblings in my mom's family has had at least one divorce, if not two, maybe three. And it's not particularly like my mom was forced to marry her rapist. Yeah, I think she deserved to divorce him.
I agree, but I think that's a little bit more of a specific instance rather than...
That's a specific instance. But
and
but I get your point.
My uncle, and my uncle, you know, and this was completely stupid on him. I love him to death, but he rebounded, got married within 6 months of getting a divorce from his first wife that he had his son with, and come to find out she ended up stealing over $10,000 from the man. Completely stole his livelihood. He had to eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches every friggin' day for like weeks on it or months on end. He's told me the story like 100 times. But I mean, like, I think if he had gotten to know Laura better, he might have actually been okay, you know? But he definitely didn't know Laura, and they immediately got married, and boom, it was just not...
Nothing?
Well, first of all, I'm a proponent of dating, of long dates, long engagement.
Dating? Yeah.
And then people don't do the pre-Cana thing, which is another mistake.
Well, I mean,
or the weekend encounter.
But that's if you're religious. If you're not religious, then...
But they have them...
What is that?
Whether religious...
Explain what pre-Cana is.
Yeah. Well, this is... they have it in different ways, but in the Catholic Church, they call it pre-Cana. You basically go on a Saturday and Sunday for about 8 hours each day, and you meet with your spouse or your fiance, and you go through a series of exercises which basically questions you on your love stuff, on your love thing. And then it's, meditation, you go to church, but it's a thing they force you to talk to each other about the marriage. Like, who's going to, how many bank accounts would you have? Would you have yours? Would she have her own? Would you have a joint one? If you have kids, are you going to raise them Catholic? Are you going to do... So it's basically all these questions telling me about, because the first thing when the one I went to, priests come up and go, we had 80 couples, the one I went to, 80 couples. He goes, half of you will be divorced in a year. That was his first line. And everybody looked at each other. And then everybody said, oh, not me, not me. But there were a lot of fights at that pre-Cana. People are, spread out throughout this big room, and you can see one start arguing with the other one, physically yelling on a piece of paper in public. Needless to say, those probably didn't work out, or they changed their mind. And he said, a few of you will not get married because of this. And the other tip, he said, no matter what you do, if you really are not sure, don't get married. Even if you lose the wedding money, the party, says don't do it. It says because it's too tough to get divorced. So
plus, then you technically can't get remarried.
Well, then you can get
you can in the church, but again, it depends if you follow through like you were supposed to in the first place, and you had your good moral compass together. That wouldn't even be an issue because you would deal with it and move on from there.
Okay,
but if you choose not to, that's again you. Now, does that happen with people? Sure, it does. Do they have it as other encounters, however you want to call it? Sure, they do. They don't call it pre-K, they call it something else. Each faith usually has something where they have the couples talk.
Unless it's an arranged, like across these arranged marriages.
Like
then
yeah, like
it's-
within like
India.
India in Hindu
Right.
culture, they're
When the guys leave, like from
You're
here, they
just-
go to
Yep.
get married.
Yeah.
My wife has been invited to a few Indian that were prearranged
Mhm.
marriages.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to go to India or something to
yeah,
the marriage.
it's a time.
It's different. I'll
Mhm.
just say it is different.
Yeah. So
And
But-
they're go ahead.
Here's a genuine question, and that I wanted to bring up to everyone. So, a lot of the people I work with in my area, some being married at a very young age, others, the military breeds a bachelor life of I have money, I can do whatever I want, I'm going to go sleep around and do whatever. And divorce rates exceedingly high. All these things have bred into the idea that a lot of people that I work with say they don't believe monogamy is real or that it's not real for a lot of people. So what do you guys think? Do you actually believe that people are really not supposed to be monogamous, or do you think that it's really just on a person basis? Like, what do you think? Do you think that it just isn't natural, or do you think it really is based on the person? I think it's based on the person.
I mean,
I think it's based on the person.
Yeah.
Like, I could never go out and cheat.
like I mean, if there's like, I'll give you an example. A roommate of mine, he was in a monogamous relationship, and as you could probably predict, it didn't work out because he wanted to be exclusive and she did not.
Wanted-
And their protecting clause for their relationship was when they're together, they're exclusive, but when they're apart, they can both do and screw whoever. And that was their agreement. Obviously, things didn't work out. And so it's
You can't
an
go
inter-
from being inclusive
right.
to
You
going
can't-
off of it.
It's like flipping a switch. And you, I mean, and so
Oh my
like,
God.
I think
Never.
monogamy, unless there's like religious reasons behind it or like financial or so on and so forth, I think it's more of just an excuse to not be faithful.
What do you
Yeah.
think, Dad?
Well, are you married or not married? And this with the question.
Oh, I'm not married.
No.
In-
But
in
you're
this
asking
exa-
the
in this
question
example.
in the example: are you married or you're not married? Because
So-
that's a big difference.
I think it sounded like he was living a bachelor lifestyle.
No,
You're
no,
living
no.
a back.
No, this wasn't about me.
Well, no,
No, not you.
We're
No,
talking about the
the example.
Oh,
Is
so
the- is
okay. So
Is
the
Are the people
individual,
married or not?
Example.
so the individual was for a man who was never married but lives somewhat like he has women that they're not exclusive. They are together, but they still mess around with other people.
Yeah,
But
they live together, but they mess around.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
known. It's not hidden. It's known.
Yep.
But he literally says that he doesn't believe humans are supposed to be monogamous. And
Well-
I don't know if I completely agree.
He's lying. You
Yeah,
can
I
be
know.
monogamous. It's
I feel like
you
it's
choose-
just an excuse.
Yeah.
It is. It's an
It's
excuse.
just an excuse. I don't want. They can't
Well,
be monogamous
Well,
because I can't control myself around others.
I'll give him a couple good reasons. It's happened in '84. It's called AIDS. Being married and cheating and catching AIDS is probably worse than death.
And getting
Because
AIDS, though, is the greatest form of karma.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Talk about
literally.
the irony and I can't even imagine that, because that's the ultimate in cheating. Now, could you get it from another thing that happens? Sure, a blood transfusion or something.
Well, before they started checking all
Yeah,
blood
yeah.
transfusions.
Yeah, well, I'm
yes.
saying since '84, okay,
Mhm.
or whenever '88 was it?
Whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, whenever it was. But to me, that scared the hell out of me. And before that, it was, what if you get somebody pregnant?
Mhm.
See, the problem was back in I'll give it a baby boomer thing. Back in the '60s and '70s, the pill came out, which was the only thing you really get is somebody. If you're not going to get somebody pregnant, you could get an STD or some kind of infection and stuff. And that's what you're worried about. It's a big deal when you can take something now and die from it. It's a big deal. And the regime for AIDS guys and women who is minimum of 23 pills a day. Because I had people, and you got to go live in your own separate place and all the legal ramifications that come in. So it's a big deal of not being monogamous. Also, the peace of mind you have from somebody who is monogamous too. Now, would I be upset if my wife all of a sudden turns up AIDS? Yeah. And then I catch it too? Yeah. Would that be grounds for divorce? Ooh, I'd have to think about that one.
I would say completely yes, entirely.
Yeah.
Right.
No, without a second thought in my mind, yes.
Yeah.
But no, because realistically, you can get it from other things.
Well, agreed.
And that's always a possibility.
The easiest way to contract it, if you're not a druggie, is
by
that or medical mispractice.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's part of it. I was in a medical situation that sometimes that could happen.
Right, but if you're with someone where neither of you are in the medical field, and all of a sudden one of you turns up to AIDS positive, most people are going to make the immediate connection of, what were you doing?
Right. But and all that ramification, family shame, all that other stuff that's going to happen when that comes about, because it's going to get out. The family devastation from AIDS or any addiction is shameful, I think, throughout the
entire.
Yeah, throughout the fire. But whether you're baby boomer or millennial, it's still shameful.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I feel that sometimes though, the getting somebody pregnant and walking away or having 4 kids, I think is definitely a millennial issue. More kids than so. Before it was, if you had 1 or 2, you wouldn't get, I call it crazy, and have 5 or 6. Some people here and some people have a lot of kids by different dads.
I don't know if I completely agree with that. I feel that with my generation, we definitely have more options to not get pregnant. You know, like I am on very serious birth control, and it's not even because I'm having sex, but say for some ungodly reason I did have sex, there's a lower likelihood of me getting pregnant than there is of me getting an STD in this generation.
Plus the inclusion of Plan B and other things too.
Well, yes, but I wasn't gonna go there because I feel like it would just start an argument.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I feel that my generation, I know so many people that are genuinely, especially from like my hometown, trying their hardest to not get pregnant because they don't want to have a kid until they're financially able to. Whereas when my mom was my age, she already had a kid. My sister, when she was my age, was on kid number 2. And I'm over here with 0 pregnancy scares. Graduated a year early. I'm in college. I'm doing very well. So
appreciate the tooting your own horn. I'm just kidding, but you're correct. And
I mean,
example,
like seriously.
It's true. I mean, I'm in the same boat. My mom, when she was 19, had 2 kids. My dad had me when he was 21. To put it in perspective, I'm 23. My dad is in mid 40s. My dad's not very old, so you're definitely correct. And one of the funny things is that I've seen so many posts that say, and I quote, "Millennials aren't having enough kids," or "Millennials are not having kids." And a lot of the reasons for that is financial stability and the inability to find jobs with the financial backing to support a family reasonably so to the level that they feel is necessary to support a child. Now, I kind of stand by that no one knows what it's like to support a child until you actually have to do it, but it doesn't take away from the fact that trying to be prepared for it isn't a bad option. To any extent that you can. Preparation is still preparation, even if you fully can't prepare for it anyway. I'd rather be 80% prepared than not at all.
Yeah.
So,
like, if I were to get pregnant right now, I know
and like support it.
You completely cut it after I know. I'm sorry.
Like, I am 20 years old and still in college. I'm not gonna be able to work a full-time job, have my own. I would get kicked out. I would have to find my own place, pay rent, work, go to school, take care of my kid. It's just not feasible, you know?
Where is Dad in all this?
Who knows?
I mean, hopefully...
I don't have a boyfriend at the moment. I don't.
Well, hopefully in that scenario he'd be there to assist.
Is that millennial? Is that millennial feeling?
No.
I don't need the dad?
No, I don't need a relationship.
I don't need a boyfriend.
Yeah, that's what she said. Like,
just in general, I don't need
in general,
a guy.
she doesn't want a relationship.
But
in that case, hopefully the father.
What is sex? To me, that's a relationship.
Right. But there's also a hookup culture.
It's what?
It's like how it was in the 1670s. There's a hookup culture.
But I think it also comes down to personal responsibility. Hookup culture aside, once you both knowingly give life to a child and don't take any preventative measures to stop it when there are plenty, even during your actual pregnancy, you both knowingly brought in life. You now both should take care of it.
You're obligated at that point. I mean,
right. I don't understand the excuses of I didn't want it.
Play dumb games, win dumb prizes.
Right. So that's my point. Is that I don't care what your excuses are. You knowingly bring in life. You take care of it. It doesn't matter if you don't want to. It's beyond you. Your life ceases to be about you.
And I'm not, like, in my own, like, personal, like, I'm saying, like, me personally, I don't need a guy right now.
Right.
I want to get my degrees. I want to do well. I want to, like, if I meet someone and I fall in love way, then sure, whatever. But I'm not actively going out of my way to get into a relationship right now.
Yeah.
I'm actively focusing on education.
Right.
So, for that.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I think the only thing I was trying to make sure is just that I'd hope that if this situation did happen, the father would be there and you would want him there.
Yeah.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
I mean...
Sounds like a hesitation.
Yeah, that's what made me confused is because you initially made it sound like it would all fall on you and a father wouldn't even be relevant to that scenario.
I mean...
Or, if you were just trying to state what would put on you initially...
I think she was going for a worst-case scenario, but where you can't go to school, father's not in, she's on her own.
Good save, Steve. Good save.
No, I think that's what she was...
Through.
No,
she was going for, like, a worst-case scenario, because she's taking preventative measures... And if it doesn't work out, then it usually it comes down to the worst case scenario.
Yeah. No, I agree. I wasn't saying that that she wouldn't in that situation. I was just making sure that she understands that hopefully it doesn't have to be that way either.
Right.
I mean, but worse. How about this? If we're going with really worst case scenario, I was raped and I got pregnant. Mm-hmm. I get kicked out. My family doesn't believe me. Ever. Blah blah blah. Shouldn't have done it. Victim blaming.
Yeah.
So. Now.
So what do you do?
We're not going into that because that's gonna pull into.
I'd rather not divulge into that one.
Okay. Call adoption.
Yeah, sure. That's a different topic for a different.
And that's a completely different moral compass too.
I'm just saying that's just another alternative.
Right.
Yeah, no, totally agree.
We'll leave it.
That's all.
We'll leave it at that. We'll leave it at that.
But I mean, in my family, I know I would definitely be on my own.
Right.
Like, I don't have someone that would be like, oh yeah, here, let me help you out. Let me do this. Let me do that. I'll take care of the baby while you're working and going to school. No, that's not going to happen.
Right. All right.
So
let's go to a different topic.
Yes, I think it's time.
We just ran this one into the ground. I mean,
absolutely
it's going on.
But I'll give a nice ribbon on this, and I'll wrap it up nice and tight.
All right.
So for me personally, we've ran this topic. We initially were trying to do this an hour in, and we were going to.
We ran this podcast into the ground, man.
Well, the thing is that we didn't even touch our secondary topic, which was going to be discussed, and then we had a tertiary that I had in case everyone else had to leave, and it was left with just me and you. So I mean, ultimately, this podcast turned out exceptionally well given the circumstances, and I thank you guys again for it. So if the reason I want to wrap it up now, not wrap it up, but do it in case is because if you guys feel the need that it's been done, we should stop here. That's fine. Mm-hmm. If you want to persist, I'm okay with that too. Mm-hmm. I'm asking for what you guys can do. I got all day. I don't really care. But
I mean,
I'm nothing
almost
without my
2 o'clock
co-hosts.
here.
Yeah, it's almost 2 a.m. here in my not
And
out. so-
I'm ready.
I know.
man,
You
I got
say
my-
that- Oh
I'm
yeah,
ready.
yeah,
And we
yeah.
also,
Yeah.
you know, like to go back to Alfred.
Yeah, tomorrow we
I
do have
don't
to go back to school.
particularly leave at like 4 o'clock when you wake up because
Yeah,
you stayed
yeah.
up till 3.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
Yeah, but I mean,
Well, I'm not trying to. If it sounded like it, I'm not trying to guilt you guys into staying. I just
no,
want to see
no,
where you
no.
guys want to.
No,
go with this.
I'm just
we're
saying.
looking at,
like,
we're looking at it. We're trying to look at it logically. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I think now with everything that we've talked about and all the topics that we've covered with my dad and Flo and Darcy as a guest, I think this would be a very good point to wrap it up.
Agreed.
Simply because
At this point, we're just kind of pushing it out for no reason.
we're just gonna be pushing it up for no reason,
Yeah.
and that means staying up later, being tired for tomorrow, and we might, and if we keep going, we'll lose topic for other podcasts.
Yeah.
Theoretically, anyway.
Agreed. So I think we'll save those for next week, so we already have that covered.
Yeah,
so
we
not to
can
worry
we
about.
can do something like that. Yeah, so I'd say this would be a good point to stop.
So the topics for next week are, for everyone who's here, you get a little sneak preview of what's going on, will be the value of money in society as the primary target for that podcast, the value of money overall, and ironically, again, generationally, where does that come from?
Yep.
And then the secondary topic was something that I personally wanted to hit on, was the idea that humans, at least mentally, have evolved to the point of almost near regression mentally. To the point where we've evolved so much it actually becomes damaging to certain aspects of the brain. But that was a very...
That's for next week. Yeah.
That was a thought I had that we don't even have to touch if no one feels comfortable doing so. But either way, I appreciate everyone who came by. I appreciate my co-hosts for being here and everyone who stuck by for this near 4-hour podcast.
Yeah.
So, again, we love you guys. We thank you so much. And this has been Screaming into the Void, episode number 4.